All right, what is up, guys? Welcome to the next Group Up podcast. I'm always hyping these up, but this one might just be the most hype. I've got a stellar lineup with me today. Beneath me, his cam's gone for whatever reason, but I'll fix that in a second. Beneath me, only in visuals, in everything else, he's above me. Seagull, the legend himself. What's up, Seagull? Let me fix your cam in the meantime. I don't know what the fuck happened there. To the bottom left, we got Samito. To the bottom left, we got Samito. And left of me.
Hello, sorry.
We need to figure this out better, but yeah, on the left of me we got Freedo. So what's up, guys? So we're gonna be doing the Great DPS Debate today. Okay, so now Seagull and I are different people. Okay, we're working on it. Technical errors are part of the deal. So we're doing the Great DPS Debate today. The way this works is, for those of you who've joined in for the Great Support and Tank Debate, is we're just gonna go through all the DPS characters and talk about whether they need changes, buffs, nerfs, or to stay the same. Because there's a lot of them, we're not going to be quite as rigid as we have been before. We're just going to try and talk a little bit more informally. But we've been helped out by the fact that there have been some mega ass changes on the experimental card. So guys, I think there's no better place to start than talking about that. So first up, even though this is a DPS debate, we're going to have to talk about it. Brigitte changes. How does this change the meta for DPS in particular? Who wants first crack while I fix Seagull's camera?
Or I think what we might want to do is run through what they are real quick, maybe.
Sure.
And then
I've got them on screen here. I've got them on screen here. So if you want to talk through the Brigitte change first, maybe, or do you want to talk through all of them? I can scroll through all of them.
Well, the reason why I say that is because I feel like this whole patch is like a whole bunch of things at once, right? So it's hard to take anything out of isolation to me, because this is one of the biggest patches they've done in a while, to me anyway.
You're right. And I think it's a very good patch. Yeah, Seagull, I assume, will return momentarily, and so will the camera positions, because right now we're all in a bit of the twilight zone. But bear with, guys. You listen to our voices. Yeah, unfortunately, that's just how Discord works. So, okay, let's quickly run through that. So first up, we have Brigitte. Base health lowered from 200 to 150. Inspire total healing decreased from 130 to 90. So the healing is reduced from 21 to 15 per second, and self-healing is no longer reduced by half. So currently Brigitte's self-healing to herself is half, no longer the case on the experimental card. Beneath that we have Orisa's base armor reduced from 250 to 200. So that means less tanky shit. And the halt radius significantly nerfed from 7 to 4 meters, and the speed has gone up. So basically now it's a lot harder to hit, guys. We'll talk more about what that means as we get into it. Pharah, her movement speed is increased with her hover jets. Regeneration rate reduced from 50 to 35, so the fuel will regenerate a little bit slower, but the movement is faster. And the barrage duration has been reduced, which was probably a buff, but we'll talk about that again in a minute. Roadhog, huge buff. Ammo reduced from 6 to 5, but damage per projectile increased from 6 to 7, and recovery increased from 0.7 to 8.5. Sigma receives some more nerfs, bringing him down from a health barrier from 900 to 700. Regeneration reduced as well. Kinetic grasp cooldown increase, so it's going to take longer before you're grasping all that shit and building shields. Symmetra, primary fire charge before the delay before losing charge is doubled, basically. I saw Seagull playing this, and he was like, this is wild, this is crazy, and we'll talk about that again. Teleporter cooldown reduced, so I guess allows for a bit more flexibility with the teleporter. You can, move it around much more quickly. And finally, Zenyatta, our boy, the holy monk, secondary fire, charge rate increased, and rate of fire increased. So there we have it, the quick run through of all the changes. And once more, I bring us to the question, Brigitte, guys, what do we think?
Well, not to turn it too much, what I want to know from you guys is, will this change the meta? Because they're first of all set out to change the double shield meta. Because each one in isolation gets kind of tricky. Like, one, would this change the meta tomorrow if they put this through? What do we think are the biggest highlights of it? Like, sometimes they patch things and some of them are relevant. Like, is there anything standouts to you guys first that's like very clearly wildly different? And we can start with Brig, but like, what's your evaluation? I would say this is huge. Like, I think this would change everything pretty much. So that makes it difficult for me to suss out strength levels of things, because I feel the whole game probably would take a quite significant turn with this change if it all went through together.
Well,
Samito,
I mean,
do it. Let's go. I know you want to do it, dude. You're just like, I can feel him, just like he's building up the power. He's like, he's holding himself back right now. You know what I mean?
All his favorite characters got changed. Orisa, Brigitte.
I mean, So I'm skeptical about Orisa, to be honest. I'm not sure yet. But Brig to start, I think it's a really good change. I mean, I know Seagull will feel my pain here when you perfectly time her shield drop as Hanzo headshot across the map and she just walks it off, right? Like, there's nothing more irritating than that. So the fact that I think it is impactful that those breakpoints were changed on Brig for heroes like Hanzo, a couple others, but I think what I'm really looking at though is the Inspire change, because Jake was talking about on Twitter. You know, this was a change where they came out with 222 Brig, where she got her Inspire to heal her team more, which means rally builds way faster. So what's going to drop is the rally build rate, but I think it's really good in the sense that it lowers Brig's skill floor, so that lower rated players will get more value, because it's much easier to die at that low level play, I feel like, from bad positioning and stuff like that. But to be honest, I still think the character is really strong because she still does everything, right? She's just a little bit more vulnerable. It's like, it's a good step in a 50-yard dash, in my opinion. Is it going to change everything? I don't know. I think it'll come down to the Fortify breakpoint change, to where you have way less time for Fortify to stack on top of the armor, which was insanely strong. So to be honest, I don't really know yet. That sim change does seem kind of nutty, though, if double shield does remain.
Yeah, that
Seagull,
one stands out
go
for
ahead,
sure.
go ahead, Freedo.
Go ahead, Seagull.
So I think we should hop in like one character at a time.
Yeah.
The Brig change, I really appreciate the AoE healing change. I think it's very important to tone down AoE healing. The health pool change, it just goes from 250 to 200, because that's her total health pool, including the armor, for those in chat who might not know. That one was a little bit surprising, but it's basically, it just means that she's much more reliant on her whip shot instead of actually going in for stuns.
Yeah. I mean, I only had a little quick, obviously the patch didn't give us too much time before this call, but I was able to get quickly into the experimental. And it does feel like it's a lot more punishing to basically ever be caught out of position as Brigitte, which is kind of overall a step in what we want, right? We want that. It's interesting though, I've seen a lot of Brigitte mains already reacting, and they all kind of are saying this is a buff for solo queue Brigittas, because obviously the self-heal now is more. What do you guys make of that take? Is it better for solo play Brigittas and worse for pro play Brigittas?
No, that's not true. But I will say, one thing that was kind of interesting with the last nerfs they did was when they took away the armor pack overheal, they reverted the shield. So her having 250 shield, I think, matters a lot more than people realize. It was 200 for a period when she did have overheal. Then they removed that, and then she's a little self-tanky. So to me, really, it's that shield health that keeps her being this sick duelist. And whether she heals a bit more or has a little less overall face health, that's not too important to me, because the shield is really what allows her to extend and make those plays. And I would also echo what Samito said about building Rally, which I said in my video as well. Rally was like way too good. I think it's like, regardless of charge rate, it's the best supported ult in the game because of how flexible it allows you to play, because then you get to take that shield and then go take space. Also, it like withstands so long, blocking so much damage, and interacts so well with so many things. You could say like, well, Nanoblade might be able to go through it, but Brig can dual Genji anyway. So the amplified effect of having Rally on a character that can duel rather than other characters that are less threatening. I don't think Blizzard has really like because Zenyatta can't shoot while he's transcendencing, for example, right? Like Brig can and can use that to go aggro. So my question is, I don't think anyone has the answer right now, but will Rally charge at a rate that's similar to some of these other support ults that charge really slow? Because if that's the case, then we might start to see the meta get shifted up. But it's hard for me to guess that just on the points of everything. The other thing I would default to, again, agreeing with Sam, but a lot of these characters, when they can do multiple things, it makes it tough for stats to be enough. Like Sigma, to me, is possible. I might go as far to say he's like the one strongest character in the whole game, because he has so many different playstyles, right? Like he can enforce the front line, he can take duels, play off on his own, he can do all of that. And Brig is the same problem, where she does all the Overwatch things that you need, and is so flexible, whether it's taking duels, stalling cart, interacting with the ult fight. So even when you lower the stats, that's the fear that it's still like the best way to play. So concerns.
Samito, I saw you making some eye expressions there when Freedo said Sigma was the strongest hero in the game. So go ahead.
I mean, Briggs is the strongest hero in the game. Okay, like hold the phone. You know, when it comes to my definition of strong here is like, okay, what has this character done to impact the game? And you know, we saw. I mean, obviously, role queue had been debated internally amongst the team, but I would say that Brigitte's implementation had a factor in it, right? The fact that goats wouldn't go away, as well as a lot of the poke hero DPS buffs, which I want to talk about today. I think a lot of the DPS heroes have been overbuffed to the point where they don't need it, and it's simply because of the tankiness of Orisa Sig, Brig Bap, that, you know, heroes like that they needed to be buffed, and I don't think they should be buffed in the game. And a lot of people kind of see me and they're like, oh, Samito just wants DPS to be strong. I want like literally over half the DPS heroes to be nerfed. I want decision making and how you use your abilities to be way more crucial than what hero you've chosen. And I think that Brig as a character is the strongest ever because of how she's affected the game altogether, if that makes sense. I'm not sure if that's... I agree Sigma's close behind because, again, they do everything, right? And I agree with your statement about, you know, the number values maybe not being enough, but I don't know. I think it's too soon to tell about, you know, what you're talking about, Freedo. I'm not entirely sold on it.
So are you talking historically, Samito? Just like over the years, Brig?
I would say over to modern era Overwatch. I'm not sure where you would consider. I would probably since maybe mid-season Overwatch League Season 1 to, you know, maybe Moth. I think Brig, I don't think Moth meta made everything else in the game have to be buffed to compete. I think you just picked what was forced into the Moth meta, but Brig is like literally made Genji. Genji had to get buffed because of the character. I didn't want Genji to be buffed either. Like I would rather the game power levels be brought down. I know I'm stepping into Freedo's territory here with power creep, but what do you think?
Are you asking me or Seagull?
Who are you asking?
Both of you.
Okay, yeah. I've given up on power creep, dude. I think we're way too far down. Like I've gone full circle so that I was trying to fight against power creep for it felt like years. Now it's gone so far that I say the only solution is just escalate it like much faster, like reduce time on barrage. Might as well just let her cancel barrage, right? Like I think characters have to be power crept in order to compete in this way, because they would have to do too much now at this point. Because since a year ago, when you and I had talked about this, like that was the time where they needed to capitalize to, you know, trim the weedy garden, as I like to call it, to get everything in order. Now, so many more things have been buffed that it would take like a whole game overhaul. So now I'm just like the new base point of the game is in this crazy era where. You know, I brought them up earlier, but like Orisa and Sigma, right? This is interesting to me because they're trying to attack the pro meta, but I feel like they're not really thinking about all the ramifications of some of these decisions where you can reduce shields, which is probably a good thing, but shields are a universal skill, mostly universal skill set across all tiers because there isn't that much min-maxing to them. There's a bit, right? When Sigma has a high skill ceiling with that, with how he can use it, but generally most of its power isn't just setting it in front. Whereas the like personal stats of Fortify and Grasp, or the strength of skill shots of Orisa and Sig being able to hit hyperspheres and rocks and all that. The problem is, and the reason why we can have a debate here about you know, which is stronger, Brig or Sig, a little bit, is because like you have to sort of assume landing all those abilities, right? Like maybe I'm wrong in assuming it's Sig, but I think like he very easily lands everything all the time, whereas Brig at least needs like a little bit more work to put it through. I mean, it takes more aim. It's give or take on these regards, but the point is, like, it's tough to balance it from the top down in this way because the rest of the game is so different with how it's played, which to the point where we discussed this just very briefly in the chat when we were starting. Like, it's the point now where if you're not in GM, Orisa is not very good. Like, I wouldn't actually suggest a tank player to climb and be like, all right, Orisa, halt, it's the best ability in the game. I agree it's the best ability in the game, but it's the best ability when your teammates play around it, when your team coordinates, when your lamps are in the right place, when your DPS are flanking on it properly. If you don't get that to work, then the rest of her normal stats suck in terms of place a shield down or brawl the front line or do whatever, and you're sort of just standing around in spectator mode.
Yeah. So
that's the trouble with balancing these things. Most of it reaches its peak performance when everything else is working correctly, and then when you take it out of that coordinated environment, then it looks like terrible. And I think this Orisa change would do that for sure, where it would just further go down that line, so much so that I don't even know necessarily that Halt would be the best ability anymore with how easily you can get away from it.
Have you played with new Halt?
No, I haven't played it yet. I was making a video.
I played for about 2 hours. So the new Halt change, I wish the developers went more in depth into the intentions behind each individual patch note. I'll tell you right now from playing it that the nerf is intended so that you can no longer pull over a shield. That is how it's meant. So you can't pull hook, you cannot pull rock, you can't do any of that over a shield unless there's an elevation change between you and the target. And that is the majority of it. Like that's just how it plays. Like you just can't do it most of the time. Unless you have to have like very, very, very good timings. Like pro teams could probably still pull it off on flat ground, but pretty much your average ladder game, maybe like once a game, you'll actually see it on elevate, depending on elevation.
Right, and what Seagull's talking about is like the height, the physical height of most barriers. Now, you would have to be so close to it to hit that you're not going to be able to combine with anything. Although there is melees, there's doom punches, there's fire strike. There, there's a lot of things that you could put on the ground through barriers, but it won't be this like pick a team apart, pull a support easily out of the team and focus them out above the enemy Orisa barrier, which is very significant in poke mirrors for sure. The other thing that I would bring up though is that 4 meter distance to me feels like a magic number when you compare it to every dodge in the game as well. I think Genji dash is like 6 meters. Hanzo's leap goes similar distance depending on how high you are. There's a lot of escapes in the game now that when you see that thing coming, even though it's 30 meters a second distance speed, I think you're going to be able to dodge it. So these are all good things. They're great things, but I don't know if I think Orisa might be trash actually. Like there's a chance. I'm not exactly sure. Like a pro team always can coordinate around that Halt, but in ranked, I don't know if anybody's going to be able to use it, which might be a good thing because we got Roadhog over here, landing hooks. He's nutty. I want to talk about him in a sec, but I think the characters you'd normally think of as skilled tanks might rise to the top, at least in ranked, because I already thought Orisa was a little rough with randoms unless they know how to play that meta already, which you guys obviously play in an SR where everybody does, but that's Blizzard's issue here, right? Because not to go too deep on another rant, but lower ranked players I think would have preferred for that Orisa power to be in passive things that don't take a lot of skill and for it to have a sharp fall off at higher tiers like that. And that might be where they're going now a little bit since like Halt is reined in. They might have to buff her shield again if she's not strong. I don't think anyone cares though if she's not viable at higher tiers.
No, I think if Orisa goes out of meta, not a single tank main will shed a tear. I do want to point out that Freedo has done the full Dark Knight arc here, where he's opted out of the chance to die as a hero, and now he's the power creep villain. So I just want to point that out for a sec. But Seagull, with the ability to not pull over shields anymore, since this is the Great DPS Debate, obviously these are great discussions to have, but since this is the Great DPS Debate, how do you think this is going to change the meta, particularly in terms of DPS? Like, obviously, if the combos at the moment, for anyone watching, a lot of the meta combos, particularly from DPS, come from the fact that Halt enables so much. Whether that's the rock, the dynamite, whatever it be that you're chucking into the Halt. That's one of the reasons why double shield's so strong. So Seagull, how do you see that changing the meta for DPS players?
Well, keep in mind, just because you don't pull above the shield doesn't mean that it's still a bad thing to pull in a group behind the shield. So things like Ashe Dynamite are still going to work because they aren't reliant on, like the Ashe Dynamite can go over the shield and the splash radius is so large it'll hit people even if you pull ground level straight into them and you pull 2, that's an easy 2 or 3 with Dynamite. On the flip side, things like Sigma Rock and actual kill pressure is much more difficult. Usually, from my experience playing Orisa, the most common thing is the shield goes down, and as you see the shield getting ready to go down, or because Orisa's shield just pops, so does Sigma now. Like the shields just pop even harder than they did with double barrier. Like, yeah, it's pretty bad. And so you just wait for the shield to go down, and then you immediately pull, and then people explode regardless. But in terms of DPS meta, Hitscan, snipers, so Ashe probably number 1. Anything that's range DPS in that regard is still going to be really, really strong. I don't think it actually changes that much. It just makes them more powerful.
And Samito, how do you feel on this one?
It's scary. I think, especially with all the DPS buffs we've seen I think Hitscan definitely reigns supreme right now in the game. I think trying to play Hanzo into this is awful. It's actually like I don't even pick the character anymore. But one thing I do want to talk about with the pool that I think Seagull did touch on as well, the kill pressure. When it comes to taking high grounds and taking angles, I think you can pressure double shield way more because I'm thinking maps like Watchpoint Gibraltar, right? Like playing Hanzo, climbing on high grounds, you had to be careful of the pull. You couldn't be near a corner, right, on an off angle or a flank if there was a head pull because you just get pulled straight in and die. So I think the ability to deny mid to long range angles in terms of the double shield characters doing it alone goes way down. So characters that do well to take high grounds on their own on off angles will excel and be able to do more, which is good, meaning, the better decisions you make and risk to reward, you actually can get rewarded for them without getting pulled from another galaxy and dying for it. But to top that off, I think, I have not played the experimental card yet, but my guess is with the Sig Shield being weaker, poke damage is going to reign supreme. I think Ashe and Widow are still the more dominant ones. And I think McCree is still better than Hanzo just because of the stun and the amount of damage that he can output onto his shield as well as frontline pressure. It can't really be rivaled in the game right now.
The interesting thing... Oh, sorry.
No,
the
you
interesting
go.
thing you talk about high ground is with Orisa pulls, you actually just can't get pulled off high ground. You can't even be pulled in the well. Like it's on Ilios.
Oh.
It's actually so hard because the radius is so small. So if you guys want to take in your mind just how reduced it is, the total volume of the reduction is 81% reduced volume compared to before from a 7 to 4 meter radius change. So it's much smaller. There are some visualizations posted on Twitter actually of how small the halt actually is. Yes, and you guys can go check that out. But the TLDR is it's very difficult to pull off high ground. It's very difficult to pull above shields. Very difficult to pull people into pits unless they're already close to the pit or about to fall off high ground to begin with. And then on top of that is it's not as much kill pressure above shields, but you can still group people for behind the shields. You can still catch people who are coming out. You can still combo with ultimates such as Hanzo Dragon and stuff like that. It still has it. It's just harder to pull off like the 4-man pull. That was like the 2.
I'm just gonna try and pull it up on screen for people while you guys chat.
That I did want to say, we want to talk about DPS, of course, whenever possible, but this stuff takes so much precedent on what you're allowed to play. And the first thing that comes to my mind when you guys talk about this is on attack, like a lot of maps, you really needed to be able to pull the thing off high ground, pull the enemy team or somebody off high ground. Like so much was around that halt. Whereas if you're just an average ranked player, and if you can't get that to work, well, you're just sort of standing around again in spectator mode, right? Like the pros can get it to work because they make space for the Orisa to get into that spot, to make that play, to capitalize on that halt. But when you're not in that environment, like I said, she's kind of weak. So I would hope that they succeed, and maybe she's a little bit more defensive sided now, where she might need high ground to get good halts off. Because no matter what, like halt's going to be sick as a concept, right? Just landing on something to confirm even a kill is just great. It's really, really good. But if it's easy to dodge or hard to set up, you might need like defender's advantage in order to really take opportunity or take advantage of it. So yeah, at some point I'd like to move on to the other changes too. Kind of excited.
Yeah. So I want to talk about the next change. Well, let's do it like a little bit chronologically if we can. So the next change I want to touch on is the Pharah change. But just to build on what you're saying, I think a lot of these changes are veering towards what we spoke about in the tank debate about how it feels like a lot of the game is shifting towards a burst meta. And I think the changes to both Brig and the changes to Orisa that we've seen over time are kind of contributing to that. Because obviously, if you think back, the first kind of big shakeup of recent times was the breakable barriers meta, right? When double shield got a huge nerf and Orisa shield basically became really comparatively shit to what it used to be. So there's that element of her shield will break much more quickly, and that's what Seagull was saying as well. It's just like paper. You put it down, it's going to burst down in a second. Now that Orisa not only has less armor, but then there's less shield as well. And Sigma now has less shield to pair with her. He has a longer cooldown in his grasp. You're now looking at a scenario where the minute the shield goes down, the Orisa's probably going to have to fortify or she's dead, because otherwise she's just going to get burst in 1 second. Same problem applies to the Brigitte, where it's like if her shield goes down, now she has less HP, so she's going to get burst down really quickly. And again, in the experimental card, obviously a lot of people were playing Pharah, and it felt particularly punishing with heroes like Pharah, who it's like one rocket comes in, and you're almost dead. Everyone's going to see you on 10 HP and kill you, basically. So Are we shifting towards a more bursty kind of favored meta, guys?
I think it's been burst meta for like a year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's been there for a long time. I would say since Sigma's release, that's when it really started ramping up. But ever since Brigida's release, probably. But most definitely since 222 launched, where we forced into 222, and then Sigma's release with that, I think it's been very burst centric since then.
Mm-hmm.
We've had Doom Reaper, right? Which I actually enjoyed that meta because I had to learn Doomfist. That was the only reason it was manageable. And then we had Rhine Diva or Rhine Orisa briefly. And then we had mostly double shield with it's definitely been burst for a long time. I agree.
I think there's been some metas in the middle of double shield, but I think the majority of the time frame since Sigma's launched has been almost all double shield. We've seen some different metas in Overwatch League, but I think those were relating to hero pools. And then we did see like a month of Rhine Diva or something, but then they nerfed Diva back down pretty quick.
Mm. Right. There was that short brawl stint, but you might say like May Wall caused the burst there, right? Where you wall something off, freeze it, and everybody bursts it together. I think another interesting point about why that's the case is that the defenses of the game or the healing of the game, which is they're kind of related, but whether it be the shields, being able to stack, having multiple that can go together, or right, like Lamp was OP for a while. Some might say it still is around corners and stuff, or Brig being able to have a personal shield. You know, there's a lot of ways that you can sustain yourself while also getting value doing other things. So because of that, and because you have to pick DPS, if you've ever played open queue recently, even like at any level, probably someone's going to try goats, right? And goats still kind of works, which is shocking because like DPS has been power crept so much, but a character like Sigma added into goats, it's a completely separate conversation. Let's not get into that nightmare. But the point is like sustaining the game is sick, and even though they reduced barriers, a lot of the other cooldowns are still really good at it. So because of that, you need a Doom Punch to actually get a kill. Like there's no point in trying anything else unless it is bursty in nature. Yeah, that's all I got to say about that without changing subjects too much.
On the topic of Pharah though, and what you were talking about, the Pharah with that change does feel very good. For those who don't know, it says movement speed increased by 20% and regenerate reduced from 50 to 35. The reason they have to reduce the regeneration rate is because they want to change the speed, but they don't want to change the total amount of like distance you can go. So they have to tone it down to like correlate with it. It's not like you could still infinite fly as Pharah, is basically what I'm saying. It's like nothing there has really changed at all. Except you just zoom around a little bit faster. It's easier to strafe. You're a little bit more obnoxious to hit and stuff like that.
Would you say she's still map dependent?
Yeah, she's always going to be map dependent because she relies on vertical cover. She's always really good when it comes down to certain maps where she can play against a Widow, but that's usually stuff like Ike first point, some maps on Oasis,
Dorado first defense.
Yeah, Dorado first defense. Yeah, there's a few other ones too.
How does she fare against Echo now with her flight movement? Is it because whenever you go against the Pharah's Echo, it feels like it's so free just because you can outmaneuver her? Does it make it harder do you think it's a noticeable difference if you're a Hitscan player or an Echo player playing into a Pharah to actually get that kill?
Not super noticeable, but I think it'll mess with your muscle memory a little bit.
Okay.
You get used to it pretty quick.
Okay.
And on the issue of like debating whether people need changes or nerfs or anything or buffs, are you fine? How do you think this puts Pharah as a position? Like, are you fine with her place as being a kind of niche map dependent pick, or would you want to see her more viable, less viable?
Personally, I feel that all characters, I think the balance goal of anything in Overwatch should be map pick. Like, I think if your character is, we're good on this map, we're not so good on that map, that's a really, really good spot for a character to be in. And I think you don't want to mess with it too much. And that's how most characters should be designed. Like that's the cool part of the game, right? It's supposed to be like, I can go play Widow on Ilios, Ruins, and then I can go play Rhine Zarya on King's Row, and then I can go play like an Orisa comp first point Anubis, and then dive comp second point defense Anubis to play high ground. Like, I don't know, there should be that variety. That's like the spice of Overwatch. That's how it should be done. It's only when certain characters become so ridiculous that they take over and become viable in every situation, every meta where their intrinsic weaknesses are overshadowed by their balance, that it becomes a problem. So characters like we saw in GOATs, AoE sustain became such a problem that it's like for years before that, dive was meta because they could play the map and you could prevent a team from getting to the objective, these death ball comps like quad tank. And then as we added more AoE sustain into the game, suddenly the map didn't matter. You could just out heal anything you wanted it and path to the point and you were good. And that's, yeah, it's a little bit, I'm going a little bit, off
No,
topic.
this is great.
Yeah, that's
No,
what I believe. In terms
think
of
what you-
balance, that's how it should be.
No, absolutely. I don't think anyone will disagree with you. I think everyone will agree with you, apart from maybe some sections of the Blizzard balancing team. Because what I was going to say is that a lot of this is a consequence of how Blizzard have approached balancing in the past, which has been in a very, we want everybody to be viable all the times at every rank. And I guess that's caused a lot of the problems.
It's not possible.
I don't think they really treat it like that. I think they want characters to not be troll picks because so if you look at historically, they did had to revamp the rework Symmetra and Torb. And that's just because Jeff Kappa said it in his AMA, something like one of the regrets he had about Overwatch was not doing an offense and defense split with hero pools. And that's because they couldn't go like Torb is a great old Torb before the rework about a year and a half ago. I forget how long it's been now. Actually, maybe it's been longer than that. It's been a strange year. They said something along the lines of like Torb was cool, but if you picked him on offense, he's basically like he's trash. And so they had to fix it because people were just trolling, right? You just picked old Torb on offense, right? And it's like, oh, you lost. Like, oh, okay, GG. And the guy sits there and he's like, I'm not trolling, guys. Like, please, if you report me, I'm gonna get you banned. And it's like, okay.
Oh, I think Seagull might have muted himself there.
Hello?
Seagull?
Seagull,
I think you might have muted yourself
Yeah, I'm
there.
here. Sorry.
There you
Okay,
go.
good.
Nice.
That's fine. Continue.
Yeah, sorry, my mic cut out for a sec because I was doing my thing. Anyway, you get the idea of what I'm saying. And so that's why they had to redesign those characters in the past. It's not like we have to make this better for new players and good players. It's just all characters in Overwatch in their current design have to be viable for both offense and defense. So that's why characters like Symmetra became so weird over the years. That's why characters like Torb had to get reworked too. Stuff like that. It's the natural just consequence of not having like an attack favored pool and a defense favored pool. So they have to be good at both. But when it comes to skill disparities with characters, that's a different topic because like Blizzard will never balance a character like Widowmaker to be good at all levels. Like that's never going to happen. But they do have easy to play characters. Like Orisa is an easy play character. Soldier 76. These are characters who are simple to the point, and they are just going to be basic characters because you want to do player friendly characters too, but you don't want your game to be full of only that. So
Do you guys agree with that, Samito, Freedo? Do you guys agree with that kind of general assessment of things?
Yeah, that hit the nail on the head. Nothing else to say.
All right. Well, then what?
Maybe
Go ahead,
last
Freedo.
point. I don't think the Pharah changes are like egregious because the things that counter her are just so much better. So probably staying in a pretty ideal state. The one thing I would worry about though is that lower ranked players, especially, like this is one of those changes, right? Brig's one of them, but Pharah as well, where if you tune this too much, it like destroys gameplay, particularly on consoles as well, which don't get a separate patch. So it's something that is scary because they already can't hit Pharahs now as they fly, and they fly pretty slow, and hit scans are pretty broken in terms of like their power level anyway. They're really, really strong. So, but that being said as well, when you got Sigma and all the hit scans got buffed, you can kind of have your choice at lower ranks. I don't think it will harm them, but people will complain for sure. So be on the lookout for that if this goes through.
Yeah, that is something to bear in mind, because I think a lot of the times when we talk like higher level, we talk pro level meta. But I know I've already been getting pinged in chat like, guy, SUV, what about console? What about lower ranks? Is this far is gonna make our life miserable? And that is a valid concern as well for the players. Obviously, the majority of players who fit into those ranks who play. But I guess it's not super oppressive, right? It's not something that's gonna make her, I don't think, a sort of a dominant beast per se. Or maybe I'm speaking out of my behind, but
it's one of those things to look out for if they start nerfing things, right? Like it's those power creep buffs is what they are basically, right? Where you're trying to buff a character into a meta they don't really fit, and then later on nerf some other things, and you kept this buff over here. It's one of those that's like off to the side that could cause problems down the line if too many things get changed.
The problem is Blizzard loves to change multiple things at a time, which really kind of tilts me. So we're sitting here in this patch right now, right? And we go, okay, yeah, let's nerf the double shield, and then we'll buff Pharah, and then we'll buff Symmetra, and then we'll buff Roadhog. And it's like, wait, why not just like tone it down one thing at a time and see what happens? Like, what's going on here? This is kind of intense.
Well, it's hard. It's hard to, because there's so many variables, right? Like it's hard to tell how one thing affects the game if we're changing like multiple at the same time when they all affect the game in their own way. It's like mixing a bunch of flavors of ice cream and expecting like a good result sometimes. And sometimes you get it right and sometimes you don't. So I understand that. But again, in terms of Pharah, I never see it being a problem in low rank. Like if you can't counter a Pharah, maybe on console I can understand this, but with all of the really good heroes in the game, you can't counter a Pharah, that you deserve to lose that game. Like, I'm sorry. Like, come on, Pharah.
Well, some characters will always be noob stompers. Pharah is one of those characters where Pharah Mercy versus bad players who can't aim up is just naturally designed to be kind of a stomper, right? Like, it's just how it is. Consoles in particular suffer from the fact that it has different inputs. So Pharah players just dominate on console. That's just kind of how that works. So that it's a little bit different. We start talking about console and lower level players because they shouldn't be balanced around, but they should be taken into account where you don't want to make the game super bad for them because they are the majority of the player base, but you don't design everything around them because it'll just ruin the game for them down the line when they become better because the average skill of your game does go up over time. So
yeah, I think it's definitely good to have her as like a skill checker. I think like old Roadhog was like this as well with Hook 1.0 and everyone was like mad at Roadhog meta.
Oh,
I think Bastion is still like this as well, and a lot of like because people still come to me all the time talking about like how do you counter Bastion, and we'll get to our Omnic boy in a minute. But let's keep going then on these changes. We need to cover them all, but we got Roadhog. I know Freedo, you're eager to talk about this, and although this isn't a DPS per se, this is going to make a difference. So Roadhog changes. Freedo, let's go.
Okay, so the key thing to know about these is, yeah, his fire rate goes down, his capacity goes down 5 shots instead of 6. Feel-wise, I think that feels better anyway, to have more impact in your shots. But breakpoint-wise is what you really got to pay attention to because he's got 25 pellets in a shot, and each one has 1 more damage. So overall, he used to be able to do 150 for the longest time, like I don't know, years at this point. They made him more spammy rather than bursty, and now all of a sudden he does 175, and that can headshot. Okay, so what that means is just about most characters now that aren't tanks will get one shot comboed just about no matter what, even when things are being used to like heal them a little bit or whatever. You have enough damage that if you hit some in the head, you're going to do that break point where between the hook and the melee, that's a lot. I mean, you don't even have to hit headshots. You can do 175 plus a melee and kill a squishy, right? So to me, this changes Hog from being what I thought was easily the worst character in the game. Like, people could get him to work, and if you were a god and you could mechanically outplay whatever, people got Genji to work before he was good as well, right? If you're just sick at a character, you could force them in ranked or whatever. But now I feel he has significant interactions against shields, spamming them out, but also guaranteeing those kills, because the difference between him using a hook, getting a kill, or that target getting away a lot of the time, which is what I feel happens now, is the difference between him being like great, have the potential to carry the game, or mostly being useless, right? I was in a game just recently playing. I meant to look back at this because Emong was streaming, right? And for those of you that don't know, I get into GM-ish when I'm on my best behavior, training up there. And I was going up against a guy named James, who I think is like a Roadhog one trick or something. He's a top 500 player, right? And he was dominating my DPS for like most of the game. Really, really good. And they were like typing to him and stuff, and we didn't know what to do. He was just clowning on us. And then I go to Zarya and just bubble every hook, and then he eventually swaps, and we win. Like, it's like that, where to me, I just feel, even though he's sick and he probably deserves that win, with these buffs, maybe he does, right? And that might lead into another conversation of like, is Hog the type of character people even want to be good? Because I feel they've trapped him in being like an off meta pick that's like the redheaded stepchild of Overwatch, where they don't really want him to be too good because he's not teamwork oriented, but I don't mind him being good. stats wise. I think he kind of has to be for the game to like have some FPS to it. But when you do that, all of a sudden now he's an actual stomper. Like he will be a rank stomper because he already kind of was when he was bad. Now he'll statistically be good, I think. So that's my take on the Hog changes. Maybe good for the game because you got to keep in mind too, Halt is getting worse. So Halt hook's a lot harder to do. So this is specifically going to be like flank Hog, you know, anti-dive, that sort of stuff. It's not like Halt hook's going to be taking over the game, I think, because already there was interactions to stop it anyway. I didn't even think it was that good before, and the Halt's just worse now, or harder to use anyway.
Scary. It's scary because I personally don't think Hog is a bad character. Like I think there are other things that are better. In ranked, okay, in team play, you know, team play counters Hog, but it's just so scary to me because I've seen these Hogs decimate games, like just literally put them on their back. But the issue is, you know, somebody will swap to a character like you said, and then you beat Hog by being disciplined. And I don't know how good it'll be in high ranks. I think good Hogs will destroy the game. I think this is a change that you'll mostly see in lower ranks where you can't really explain. Like if you watched like a plat game, like I wouldn't be able to explain to you what's going on, right? I'm just be like, what's going on here? I think in those situations, in the chaos, he thrives. But I would prefer to wait and see to what happens after, you know, the Orisa Sigma changes first on this. But I'm a little nervous to see what happens. I think it might be really strong.
So I played him. I didn't play him, but I played with and against a Hog for a lot of the time, and honestly, I didn't even notice it. Like, the only thing that happened more consistently was stuff like if you hook an Ana, it felt more consistent to always one shot, and because you need less headshots, stuff like that. But it didn't feel like some massive, huge buff or anything. It just felt as like slightly minor buff.
And that's fine. With Matrix in the game, Sig Shield in the game, Bubble in the game, honestly, during the game, stunts, like I feel like he can get away with that. Then it's just a little nervous to see us continuously, you know, push these heroes out. But that sounds good then.
How did you feel when you're matching into those, Seagull? What do you think like is the MMR of those lobbies that you get in when you're in the experimental card? Do you think it's close to your normal MMR or like what's the gap?
Oh, I do viewer lobbies, so I have a mix of everyone. Yeah, it's a mix of everything. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. No matter how you do it, testing these can be rough, right? So my concern is that like, you know, if the skill level isn't there, then maybe you know you're not going to notice. But I think for sure though, he math wise, like he'll have more shield pressure, right? Which maybe this doesn't matter, but like what Blizzard's trying to do, I think, is say Orisa Sigma in poke. If you want to have a poke mirror, you basically have to also pick Orisa Sigma right now, anyway, on live patch, because their damage and cooldowns are so good, and their shields are maybe not great, but they're good enough, right? Whereas if you pick Hog, well, his damage isn't very good, and he has no shield. So when you're trading that, it's just like you're at a deficit all the time, and Hog has to make a flanking outplay. Whereas I wonder in coordinated play, with the shield health going down and Hog's damage going up, and maybe his breakpoints and reliability to one shot, that's where I'm thinking of it. But maybe that's like too theoretical. And in truth, every character has like a button they can press to not die in the game now. So maybe that's good enough to like dodge it every time, or you know. So that'll be interesting to see. I'm a little afraid though when they increase his damage like this. Again, it's sort of like the Brig problem where you buff a character to deal with a meta character, but then he destroys other characters. Like in order to compete up against Orisa Sig, Hog getting buffed, does he like shred Winston and Reinhardt now easier?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, my take on this is I'm a little bit confused by this buff, because I'm wondering what it's trying to achieve really. Like is the goal of this buff, we want Hog to feel, let's say you buff a hero and you're like, we want this guy to be potentially viable in Overwatch League. That's not what this is, obviously. Is it then is like we want this to be a great change for top 500? Maybe that's what this change, because really the skillful Hogs will see a difference here, I think. And I've seen already some like Hog, you know, really high rank Hog players react, and they're very happy because they feel like this will really help them. So maybe it'll help the top 100, but will it really help any of the lower tier Hogs? No, I don't think it really changes much for Hogs in the majority of ladder, because like we already said, he already acts as a skill check kind of hero where everybody is everybody in plat and gold and diamond complains about the hog on the flank, guys, hog on the flank, somebody pick Reaper, please, somebody pick Reaper, kill the hog on the flank. And that won't change per se. Maybe it'll get slightly even harder, but I don't think that'll change per se. It just feels like it has the potential to be another one of those power creep buffs where it doesn't change a whole lot right now, but then later down the line we're going to be like, oh shit, hog is like really crazy right now. And again, to your point, Freedo, like, do we want hog to be a viable meta character? Because what is he really? Again, he's a good skill check hero because he's like, I'll just go solo and I'll hook people, and if you don't change to deal with me, you lose. But again, I know the devs have been very keen on sort of, we want, you know, teamwork to be the higher level, and ultimately I think most players, as much as we like clutch potential as well, we also want teammates who don't just go solo and do their thing and just like mute voice and like tell us we're bad and just go pick hog and frag out. So it's a bit of a confusing buff to me. But unless you guys have any more thoughts, let's speed on, I think.
My only thought is I'm happy with hog getting a minor buff because most hogs I see in game are just DPS players who just want to skip a queue, so they're just hanging out. So like if he gets minor buffed, I'm like, whatever, dude. Maybe he'll be not a throw pick as much. Cool. That's about it.
All the cooldowns that destroy him, all the cooldowns in teamwork that destroy him will still destroy him. It's more about if it's reliable enough to do. And the thing that I ask is like, are Hog's picks more reliable than playing around halts now because they're arbitrarily putting, you know, they're trying to shift the power that way. I think at higher levels, no, but for most players, most definitely yes, because I already felt it was a little difficult to do. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, so again, consciously because of you guys' time, I know you guys are busy folk, unlike me. So I think we kind of touched on the Sigma and the double shield nerf, but again, any sort of thoughts on how this changes things up for just the meta in general, but particularly as well DPS's Sigma also being weaker, just generally double shield being hit hard.
Would you guys think this just makes hit scans even better than they already were?
Yeah.
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 I was blown away that if you're going to try and make double shield not meta, you don't include a nerf to like Ashe, just in general, her reload speed, McCree attack speed, Pharah attack speed, like just across the board. There's so many things. Junkrat damage, Sim damage. Why did Sim get a buff? There's a lot of questions. Why are we nerfing shields when people are already complaining like, I just get one shot if a shield isn't up. Let's nerf the shield. I get one shot now. Yeah. It's like, well, maybe you should have, yeah, okay.
It's scary. It's scary. Like all of these poke heroes, I think it is scary. Like you queue up and you notice the difference in the game now, and you can't turn a corner. I feel like Hanzo's the only one that's back at his original power level right now. There might be one or two others, but like I've been trying to play. I know I keep coming back to Hanzo, but like I feel like he's a great example of it because he got buffed. I think he's the last DPS hero to have created a meta. And I might be wrong in that, but season 10 Hanzo, I think, was the last DPS hero that caused the meta to be played around him rather than, you know, Goat's meta or double shield meta, or maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I don't think I am though. Look at how he fares against a lot of these characters and abilities. Like it's so hard to play to the point where if I'm playing Doom, Genji, you know, I'm just like, I can't play into these characters. So I just switch to Torbjorn or I switch to McCree. And I feel like I'm putting in like half the effort and getting twice the reward. It's just, I think Torb needs to be tuned down too. Like I want all of them to be kind of brought back. It's like we're opening the floodgates right now. We have to be careful.
So keep in mind, you need to talk about like DPS changing the meta. The latest one would definitely be like Genji like 3 weeks ago before they actually.
You don't think that was Nano?
No, they didn't change Nano. They changed Genji.
Well, did it change the meta though? Like I see what you're saying, but like I feel like he just fit in the meta all of a sudden. You know what I mean?
Oh,
because
okay.
Like
the comp was still the same.
Sure.
Yeah.
The comp was still the same essentially. Just now there's a Genji flanking.
Now
you
just got a Genji flanking for the halt. You know, like all the same principles still looked the same to me. Because what was it before? They had Ashe and was it Tracer usually in the patch before that? Then she got pocketed by Brig armor. I'm trying to think because a lot of things got changed at the same time.
We had my boy. Rest in peace.
Well, I mean, we're bringing it up now, so let's talk about it. I mean, Hanzo, Samito, you feel like he's gone back to where he was previous? I mean, if you remember, like original Hanzo, people were like,
I would take Scatter Arrow Hanzo over this one, if that's what you're asking. Like season 9 Hanzo over. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Why is that?
Because you had a potential to turn a fight with scatter. You don't do that with Storm Arrow. You just up shooting to the rest of shield, boom, boom, boom. You could okay, I don't think you can now, but I could one shot a Sigma with a good scatter. Like I could one shot a Break with a good scatter. I could one shot a Bat with a good scatter. Like you can't do that with Storm Arrow. It's roughly the same shield break, I believe. But you lose your pick potential in a meta where burst damage is the only thing that instantly wins a fight. You get the first pick in a fight in Overwatch, you have an 80% chance to win that fight, right? Hanzo, you don't really get that anymore because Brig is 250 HP with the shield. Your headshot wouldn't kill her, at least, till Experimental comes alive. Orisa, she got her health buff, but you could at least break the shield faster and force the cooldowns faster. Like, Scatter Arrow Hanzo would definitely be better in this meta than Storm Arrow Hanzo, in my opinion, because the duel doesn't matter. You rarely get to take duels one-on-one with another player.
Seagull, I mean, you played on this, so go ahead.
The leap for Hanzo is definitely the most important.
Yeah, you're right. I forgot about that.
Because if the leap is busted, if you don't have leap, you would just immediately explode.
I would take Scatter Arrow over Storm Arrow. I'm changing my take there. I would prefer Scatter Arrow over. I'm not saying Scatter's come back, by the way. There was a lot of stupid ass features about that ability, but I'm saying it would be better than the Storm Arrow.
See, Sam, I think what you're forgetting is that back in the day, characters used to have punish ability to them. Like you used to get wrecked for positioning poorly back in the day. Like now everything just pushes a button and it lives longer, runs away, or whatever. So anyway.
But I mean,
Seagull, I interrupted you.
Yeah,
sorry.
Seagull, how do you feel about Hanzo's state right now?
Hanzo's in this he's in a weird spot because ever since his initial rework back then, he became much more new player friendly. Like he became much easier to play. Like exactly what you said. Giving him a leap gave him an escape. When you give Hanzo an escape, it's pretty interesting. Ever since then, he's been in this really weird spot where it's like he is in the same niche as Ashe, except he is not as consistent as Ashe because Ashe can just get a mercy pocket and one tap you, and you have to shoot a log. And sometimes you're gonna log people, sometimes you won't. And he's in a nice weird spot. I don't really know because I haven't actually tried to main him in so long now at this point. I feel like a lot of the impact I have as Hanzo, if I play him, comes down to things like either I just go on a crazy flank and I Storm Arrow somebody, or a dragon combo with Haltz, but Halt's about to get nerfed. So I don't know. I'm not super educated on the current state of Hanzo because I don't play him as much.
It changed a lot.
The way that he might be able to make a comeback in our ideal state is that if it was map specific based on him being able to run up walls, he's always been decent on Hanamura for that reason. The problem is Ashe can kind of do that too with Coach Gun anyway. Or if you get in a meta where the recon arrow has an increased value for whatever reason. And one way that I would say it doesn't right now is because everyone's positioning it it's so safe anyway, right? It's not there's not a ton of flanking going on. Usually there's one guy flanking, at least in the pro meta from what I watch. So in some ways that you can find value for that in ranked. I saw this Argay clip, for example, where on Dorado streets, he puts a recon underneath the high ground there, and he can pop up. Like those kinds of plays that's got to be Hanzo's niche, right? And the problem is, I feel most of the game is so obvious in terms of you're just setting up crossfires from range all the time. Whereas in more of a divey meta, not to say maybe Hanzo would just get rolled in that, but if you're trying to set up flanks more, is my point. Then the recon arrow has an increased value, but that's just theory crafting at this point.
Well, so I played Hanzo in the double shield meta as well back in the first season of Contenders this season, and the heroes that are meta really hurt him because when you're playing against Seagull, back me up here. When you're playing against Ryan and Zarya, you have a chance to outplay them, right? If Zarya uses the bubble, you can 2-tap her in the head and win the fight for your team. Against Orisa Sigma, the Sigma instantly shields you, and you have to force the grass. It's so hard to get value, and to top that off, your splits with Dragon don't actually matter because what you'll end up doing is you'll just feed their Baptiste ult. If you try to initiate with a Dragon, you pull Dragon, he drops a drone, he has his ult. You couldn't do that. So you had to use Dragon to either force the Ant Matrix and their immortality field so that you could pull Dragon and win the fight with that, or you pull Dragon first to force their drone and then win the fight with your Ant Matrix. So the ways that Hanzo actually has to win the fight have been limited so much, and especially with Brig right now with her shield and Bap with the drone, you miss one shot on either of them, and you have no way of turning that into making an individual play against them, and that's kind of why he's suffering. So it's not. I would prefer to play Hanzo against full dive than I would prefer into double shield, because I actually would be able to hit the headshot on the Tracer or the Genji every once in a while, or like I have a chance to outplay that player. But based on how the abilities work nowadays, like your chance to actually make something happen is just. Why would you not play Widow over that? Because Widow has 2.5 times the crit rate of Hanzo and can one shot across the map. Nah, she's better.
It's also more complicated because Hanzo fits. There's like different levels of hit scan or just general poke or snipers, and Ashe fits the same niche as Hanzo, but she's hit scan and she has TNT. And the hard thing is Hanzo can work these off angles really easily because, let's say on maps like King's Row or anything, if he can go to a flank, he can actually like wall climb up and then still have an escape, whereas Ashe has to use her coach gun just to get to the high ground in the first place. That's like the one main difference. The problem is it never really matters because what always ends up happening is there's a Sigma shield flying at you across the map and then you'll get poked out. That's usually how it works because the Sigma will poke you out no matter where you go.
So you think with these changes to Sigma, will that change whether Hanzo, for example, might be viable?
So I don't know because I don't know if it really affects Hanzo being viable as much as tank comps in general might change, which specifically might make Hanzo easier to play. I think Sigma's main, like the reason why he feels so strong on the ladder as someone who has not played competitively against Sigma just is his damage and his ultimate. And the fact that Grasp is just a giant diva matrix. So, you know, you can't catch anybody because the Sigma will run in front and it'll push shift. And so that gets punishing, like you could punish that a little bit easier because the cooldown got increased. But he's still going to poke you out. Like he could still like 3-shot you. So it's scary.
All right, well. Oh, Freedo.
Final point on that, I'd say like it's what I'd say is a lot of these characters are good to talk about for ranked, but until you start to topple the best stats, you're not really gonna get into the meta area. I mean, you get Soldier to work in ranked, right? Like technically, sometimes if you play like an idiot, I've seen Sam do it at some point. He's waving, but right. So like, yeah. It's tough out there for Hanzo, where at some point, I don't know if now's the best time, but do we think Ashe got overtuned? Like, is that on the long list of things of characters that should be nerfed?
Yeah, I was just going to bring this up.
The problem is, this is why I don't like the concept of adding hero diversity through balance, because there's no way to balance Ashe to Hanzo perfectly, to Soldier to Widow. Like, we've actually got about as much variation as I think the game can handle, and as soon as you just start to tune one thing up or down, one of them wins or loses, and it just sort of goes, flips over to the other one. So I don't think it's a solvable problem, because before this, Ashe was just sort of average. Like, she was maybe like, I don't know, maybe Soldier or Hanzo's position now, ish, relatively.
I would say she was better in that, as someone who played a shit ton of Ashe during that time period.
Okay.
During Goats meta, I one-tricked Ashe like 45-50. Like that was Goats meta where I counted 24 out of 28 games in a row were Goats mirrors, and I would just insta-lock Ashe like that. I don't know. She was always. Yeah, I did. After that, I didn't play for 3 weeks. Ashe has always been very strong versus Deathball comps if there is no diva who is aware of Dynamite. And the moment divas start falling out in Dynamite, you can just like AoE down. So like it's very free. It's very free ult charge, very free damage. It's a lot of poke. I think she's always been pretty good. She's received not only just strict buffs, but also the change to her scope made her more fluid to play, which encouraged. This is like more of a soft change where it encouraged players to play her to begin with too. Because she used to have this like queue up thing. It made her very awkward to learn.
So for anyone watching who doesn't quite understand the sort of the whole balance of this, why is Ashe so much better than something like a Hanzo or a McCree or something similar?
She literally just does more. The AoE damage from Dynamite, Bob is really underrated as an ultimate, a 7th man that you can set on any angle. Like, if you just compare the kits, like, pound for pound, like the utility that Ashe gives is just way more consistent and way more applicable to what abilities are in the game currently. So.
But here's the question though: if they reverted the Viper buffs, like, would that still be the case? Like, to Seagull's point, TNT has always been sick. Like, I don't even think they changed it, right? So like against goats, you land a TNT, hit everybody. That's pretty much, you know, the same thing. And now we're playing around Orisa Holtz, similar reason. But the reason why she's like ubiquitous is that Viper, her main primary fire or scoped fire, is as good, if not better, than the other range damage dealers. Also, like the TNT was never in question. Like that was always insane. But it just, you know, she didn't pick off as easily as
Viper buffs were the icing on the cake, so to speak. They're the thing that threw apart.
How would she function now if you reverted them, though, is my question.
Well, with the experimental change, she right now she's really relying on Orisa pulls. Like if there's Orisa pull, you just dynamite every single time. That is like half your damage in an actual game. And then her actual kill pressure usually comes from just hitting mercy boosted headshots if you're on ladder, or just in general just headshots if you with stuff like a window if you have a BAP. I don't know. I think she's pretty reliant on halt when it comes to general use, or like making sure people are deathballed. But then again, if people are playing Ryan comps again, they naturally deathball anyway, so it's not like you really care about halt. So
I think yeah. I mean, the interesting point you bring up is the ladder thing as well, because I think the mercy pocket is key to the ladder Ashe, not so much the pro Ashe, but like the ladder Ashe is basically with the mercy pocket is way better than any other hero to mercy pocket, I think, and that also makes it super oppressive, I think, as a combo. I don't know if you guys have experienced it, but I know a lot of people are just like raging all the time at the fact that I think because she has better mobility than something like pocketing a McCree, and obviously a longer range than something like pocketing a McCree, without necessarily being as sort of easily picked off as Widowmaker, it just makes it really, really a ladder stomping combo again.
Yeah.
I would have to review all the changes she's had, because she's received quite a few buffs back to back. The big one I remember just being is she reloads extremely fast, and that used to be her one drawback, was you would have to be very aware of your ammo count and everything you're doing. Now you don't even really have to pay attention to that part of her character, because she just reloads so fast. She has so many bullets, it doesn't even matter nearly as much as it used to.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you basically increase her, you increase her ability to just consistently do things, and a hero that's already so like Hitscan as a role is just so consistent in the game right now that, you know, for her, a hero that is kind of like competing for that sniper spot, but also is competing for that duelist spot. When you take away that only drawback, she just gets that advantage, especially when you're nerfing Hanzo at the same time. You see her power level. Like, I remember going up against like top 500 Ashe players in the double shield Hanzo meta, where everyone thought like, you know, Hanzo was the reason that was a meta, which he clearly wasn't at this point. It was hard to beat them. I split the mercy pocket as well. Like I felt like I was permanently going into a disadvantage, and the only time that I would be able to like push her was I would save Storm Arrow for when I turned the corner after I heard her shoot like 5 or 6 times, knowing that she would be rotating while reloading. And now that that's gone, it's like I don't even have a window to like really go for her. And I know that you reload management, cooldown management, like tracking that's really important in Overwatch, but like at least at high level play, like that's just gone now.
Well, the big disadvantage to Ashe is always her head is massive. So at least with that part, if you're playing Hanzo, yeah, if you're playing Hanzo, like you just go for the one tap. You don't care about anything, because you know like you're gonna hit that so often because her hat is so damn big. So
that is if there's not an immortality field on the ground. Unluckily, that the amount of times, oh god, that's pain. No more Hanzo talk. Yeah, no more Hanzo
PTSD.
Talk.
The PTSD.
Man.
Freedo, you look like you had something to say on that.
Yeah, I would say you're talking about the flexibility and everything. Another thing to remember is that they increased the hip fire on her as well. Like there's just so many things. Loads faster, aims. The aiming changes, it's more fluid. The hip fire is better. I think that kind of like invades on McCree a bit as well. So yeah, I'm not sure what they could do to balance her, because I sort of think that if her pick off, if she's less reliable and she's designed more the way we kind of want her to be, then I wonder if she just fits into the old power level, which is, you know, a bit more niche, maybe underrated at that point she was, and now she's like defines the meta. So Blizzard seems to kind of do this where they just shift around who's meta, and it's just Ashe's turn now. So
I think they're just yeah.
Go ahead, Seagull, you go.
I believe that Blizzard knows they have no content until Overwatch 2. And so their goal is to just give everyone a revolving meta as much as possible. So that way, at least the game is interesting to play in the meantime. Because for a while, they were doing 2-week cycle bounce patch, and then they stopped that. But as far as I know, they stopped. I might have to go review the timings again. And so I really do think they're just, they're trying to make the meta shift as much as possible. So we have as much of a reason to continue playing the game and enjoying it until Overwatch 2. Because I hope that they are looking at Overwatch 2 with stuff like this and looking to, like, you talked earlier about power creep. You're like, yeah, I hope this go all in on power creep. And I'm looking at it like, wow, I really hope they just redesign a lot of this in Overwatch 2 because that's the whole area where they actually can tone everything down is a giant expansion where they can be like, yeah, this is a new game. So we're bringing everything back down. Everything's going to be changed. It's much more of an excuse. And so hopefully they do that, but ultimately we don't know anything. So we'll see, I guess.
I mean, that's something interesting to talk about as well. Because, I mean, Freedo, you mentioned earlier you're pro power creep because you felt like we're too far down the rabbit hole. Do you kind of agree with Seagull saying, is there a last chance in Overwatch 2 coming out that we might get that? And Samito, I want your thoughts on this as well.
They can completely redesign everything if they want, but I just don't see it happening because players get used to like the way things feel, right? Like I already know why they've been dragging their feet with like these Brig nerfs and stuff because the average player already was struggling to play her, but at the same time, either a different department or whatever wants, Genji in the Overwatch League, right? And I sort of feel like this patch on the experimental card is similar to that, where it's like, all right, we've had enough double shield. Let's have a tournament that doesn't have it finally. Let's do whatever you can by any means necessary, make it happen. And the thing I am not a fan of, I think the game could be balanced well in a power creep environment or in a competitive environment, either or. But it needs to be more holistic in terms of like, map specific design where characters are supposed to be good on different maps. Whereas I don't think that's necessarily been the goal at the moment with how strong everything is. I mean, I just feel like you'd have to nerf every character in the game to de-power creep it. So yeah, that's my struggle at this point. I can't even imagine it because if we're struggling to like get a beat on this patch, right, after all this experience on this meta and everything, we're like we strongly disagree on some characters, right? Imagine trying to scale that to 3/4 or more of the heroes getting changed. It's just such a vast undertaking at this point. But there is a benefit to power creep in that you can have more like passive interactions or like a character that Sim, you brought up her wacky buff. One thing that I thought about is like if shields are weaker, she might not be able to get charge as often because if the game is even more bursty than it was before, believe it or not, because we're taking sustain down a little bit, so maybe she won't have as much protection. Because Sim, her ideal world is both shields are strong, double shield meta, you're both cooking each other, and they have a soldier and you have a Sim, right? And you have infinite ammo, he has to reload, you do more damage, whatever. She wins out, right? But if you start to reduce those sustain, then maybe it's harder for her to get up to that. Maybe that's not the case because you can still find the perfect positionings to get her into those spots. But that's just sort of like where I'm assuming they're thinking with some of these changes. And they want more like, well, Sim counters shields and Torbjorn's ult counters Briggs ult and more things like that. I feel like we have a handful of those items in the game and they could just increase that for Overwatch 2, and I suspect that's the route they're going to go based on all of the direction of their balance. Like I don't think we're gonna see a huge overhaul, unfortunately, because I agree with you guys that I wish it was balanced for competitive play, but it's like they want to have their cake and eat it too.
To be fair, they did say that that's the direction they were going this year. And I think
attack the meta, not that they de-power creep the game. They said they attack the meta, which is what they're doing here, right?
Okay. What I would like to see for Overwatch 2, especially, this is kind of off topic, but not really. I think
no, go for it.
Because it has to do with all the DPS heroes, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, guys, okay? But I feel like the less abilities, I feel like Overwatch has become way more about forcing the overpowered abilities on the other team so that they don't have them and then punishing them while they don't have them, rather than how you use your ability. Okay, my favorite thing about old school Overwatch, like I was a Genji bot boy. Okay, I saw the Dragons trailer, I was like, I'm playing that game. Okay, like that's just how it went. you know, when I played Genji into a McCree, right, it wasn't about like, okay, my hero's better than his, so I could beat him. It was like, okay, deflect is neutral into a McCree. It's about how I use my kit, not, oh, I have to force an ability, Immortality Field, you know, break the Brig Shield, force the Orisa Fortify, force the May Wall, et cetera, et cetera. You know, the game had so much more emphasis on decision making. And I feel like because of a lot of these buffs, especially in the DPS category now, right, the individual decision making that you have as a player has gone down, making the game feel way less closed. If that makes it way more oppressive. I'm not sure what the right word is for it. I'm still struggling with this, putting this together myself, but
rock, paper, scissors. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like you have the right thing at the right time. That's how I describe it. You're completely right. My point is they could make that more complicated or much less complicated.
It should be less.
It could go either way.
Because if we want the game, to quote Jeff here, Blizzard's goal as a team is to make a very competitive game that has elements in it that make the game way more accessible to a wider market, which as a business, you have to understand and respect. You want to get as many consumers into your product as possible, but the stronger heroes are and the stronger abilities are, you know, on paper, you might think that helps, but I think it actually hurts because I was watching Dr. Disrespect play the game and I watched him kill a Moira. And all of a sudden, here comes a damage orb across the map, and he dies after killing her. And he's like, why am I dead? Right? And I'm just like, I don't know why the hell you're dead. Ask Jeff. It's a load of crap.
Someone somewhere just hit their bingo card, Samito.
How did you turn this into complaining about Moira? It is actually impressive. It is impressive.
Someone take a shot. Someone take a shot. Someone watching take a shot.
Okay, every time I make a damage or joke, I will take a shot. But listen, no, seriously, like I feel like abilities like that. That's the only example I've like seen in my head, right? But Moira is a post-game hero, to be fair. Okay, to be fair. But I mean, think of abilities like that, guys. Like where you would get a sick flank as Genji or McCree, or you know, Reinhardt lands a sick shatter, like all of these things. But now there are abilities in the game where you try to play Rush into Orisa and she just pops Fortify. You're not killing her. Immortality Field, you know, it's like these abilities aren't about, you can't outplay them. Your options are reduced. The skill ceiling of the game is lowered and the learning curve is also crunched together, meaning the consumer won't really get as much out of the product. Am I wrong in saying that? And do you think that DPS nerfs to start would be a good way to kind of open up that learning curve again?
Okay, I'm not going to comment on the consumer whatever side of things. I will say I would be very surprised if that, no, don't even bring that into it in my mind. How this really works is when you start increasing sustain and also DPS to this level, where players feel like they either live forever or die instantly, means that the only thing that really mattered are cooldowns. That's what we're describing is simply the transition of Overwatch from more of the FPS space to more of, we have these cooldowns, we need to force these cooldowns, this is now the game. And that's, I mean, it was always like that to some extent, but never the entire extent. And now it's become much more lopsided in that regard. Like, yeah, sure, you still see like Ashe headshot or Widow one-shot stuff, but the cooldown based gameplay is basically what you're describing, and sort of like all the rock, paper, scissors, whatever. It's all about the cooldowns, force them, and that type of thing. Yeah.
I mean, would a sort of global toning back of everything, and I know Freedo said it's very difficult to find that right balance, and I completely agree. Like we're struggling. I think the greatest minds on earth might struggle, but I mean that's us. But you know, it's not easy to figure out. So, but is it better to maybe go hard and bring everyone back to a really weak level, quote unquote, let's say, although you know power is relative. But would it be better to just go really hard, bring everyone back to a weak level, and then maybe buff them later if you feel actually we went a bit too far, rather than go further down the train we're already on?
Too many heroes, I think.
I really don't think it's as hard as you think.
There's a lot of heroes, is my point. If you want multiple of them to feel viable for most players, and first of all, at high levels, I don't think there's any balancing they can do to make like lots of things viable at the same time, because the powers are so different, right? So if they add Lamp in, it's like completely changes the game. Like nothing's been like that before. They add Brig in, it's completely changes the game. Nothing like it before. That's my issue. So one example that I think gets fairly decent results is Dota 2, where it's exactly what Seagull was saying, where you know, you got the right abilities or you die instantly. That's how Overwatch plays now. And when I think back to like 2016 Overwatch, well, the things that dominated were, you know, like because you couldn't. There's a lot of jockeying for position, right? There's a lot of like being open and being able to exchange movement or tracer moving around and being behind and not being touchable. Now everything's very instant in that way. And when you have lots of those abilities, well, you can like, you have more things to tune. You have more levers. You have more, you can add another interaction. You can be like, this character counters that. Or we talked on the podcast a couple weeks ago, like maybe Winston does more damage to deployables or whatever. You can add those passive things in so that everything kind of has its place. Whereas if you don't do that, then either your new stuff doesn't have the desired effect to like be useful, right? Like when Ashe came out, you know, Seagull might disagree a bit and say she could be used, but to me it was like, you know, what was the point of this character being added? Kind of. Orisa the same thing at launch. It was like, what's the point? It like, so either they have these false options that don't really change the game, or they do change the game and break the game. So it's like you either could lead into that or like, yeah, I don't know. The other thing they could do is, you know, hero bans or something, you know, that would help a lot. Like, I think it's very doable. I think if you, you check out your bingo card now. Someone's got bingo at this point. No, but seriously though, if they had a different format, I would think it's way easier to accomplish this. But right now, like I don't know how they get multiple things unless you've got a long list of wish list items on the balance card to figure out a way to make it work.
I mean, Seagull, you said it was not as difficult as it sounds. What do you have in mind?
All the DPS buffs that were added during GOATS meta and they added 222, they should roll most of those back. Like it's not that difficult to test and put that on experimental. I just disagree that it's still hard. It's not hard.
That's what they
It's literally just numbers. Most of them are numbers. You bring back Ashe fire rate or reload speed a little bit. McCree, Pharah. Who else am I missing here?
Junkrat.
Reaper, May.
Sim. Yeah, like there's so many buffs that happened during this era that like you could probably put all those on one experimental card with the Brig AoE heal change and just see, hey, does this work or does it not? Like it's not the fact that healing back is hard. It's the hard part is designing and creating new characters without pushing it in that same direction.
Oh, Seagull, we lost you again.
Shit.
You're good. We got you. You're good.
Yeah, you go. I was just saying, barely.
The number part is not very difficult. The difficult part is when you add in new heroes in order to not break the ecosystem, the balance you already have. I feel like Ashe is probably the most successful character they made in that regard, where it was a character that was niche, but it was still good. Not many people knew how to use her or anything until they started buffing the crap out of her. And then everyone started playing her. They're like, wow, this character was actually kind of good all along. But you did see her, in my opinion, regularly on ladder. It was just she just fulfilled the same niche as Hanzo, and Hanzo was good.
She's like old Hanzo too, and like old Hanzo was a niche, and then season 10 happened, and you know he kind of dominated the game for a little bit.
You can see the fondness in Samito's eyes when you mention season 10.
In Seagull, I trust. Well, we should run this experiment. Why not?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Put it up. I'd like to see it.
Blizzard put it up. No, I was gonna say Blizzard put it up, but I'm just gonna like people in my Discord. Let's try this out. We'll see what happens. But yeah, go ahead, Freedo.
Yeah, mass nerfs. I'm not against attempting it. I think then they would have to change a bunch of other things too, because I think then the power level of tanks and supports would feel more oppressive because they're already strong. Like my argument to not do it, I don't really care what they do at this point, because I don't know if there is any balancing the game. I don't know if that's a possible thing that's gonna ever happen. I don't know if it's ever has happened, but the like DPS were just bad for like years, kind of, and they're as strong as they've ever been now, and I still think tanks and supports are stronger still, basically. So if you know, that's my issue. So we have to bring those down too at the same time, because I think Sigma's outrageous and Brig's outrageous, and Batiste is like better soldier with a better insane cooldown, right? So yeah, I don't know, because the problem is competitive games have what I would call, because we cover Valorant as well, so that's like a great example. That is a game that is balanced for competitive players, the highest level players, and because of that, a lot of the decisions look boring on paper. Like they make things less exciting, Whereas Blizzard goes the other way, where they want everything to feel exciting and crazy, and you to feel empowered when you're playing Brig to some degree, right? And you know, you take a character like Reinhardt, who got stomped for a year or more. You know, when they added Steadfast to him, that's an example of good power creep to me, because the immersion and what you're supposed to do with that character finally fulfilled in the world of lots of CC. So when you add in these other complexities of like, well, there's a lot of shields in the game, or there's a lot of stuns in the game, or whatever, that's where power creep is like a useful tool, because I mean, Ryan having Steadfast was definitely overpowered, but like it worked in my opinion, in hindsight, despite me hating power creep in principle. So I don't know how they keep the game to fulfill that promise to the players of like easy instant gratification power, and it also be competitively balanced. That's why I go the other way.
I disagree with you there, because look at Echo. I think Echo is the perfect example of a hero that was over the top, cool, but balanced. Like she had one minor nerf. She's not dominating the game. She's not doing any of this stuff, right? We saw her get played quite a bit, you know, in at least in, you know, the tier 2 tournaments, right? I'm not sure, a little bit in Overwatch League as well. I think that you can absolutely continue to do that, because the reality of Overwatch is, to me, it's the best FPS game of all time, because no one has ever done it in the way that Blizzard has in Blizzard fashion. It's the most polished game. It has the best game engine. It just looks so visually amazing compared to the rest of the gaming industry that I don't think there will ever be a competitor, like ever. And to that degree, at least in the casual player base, which is much greater than the competitive player base, that has already been fulfilled, right? And I might be a little bit off base there, but that, to me, like, I think that they've always managed to hit that. And I think they'll still be able to, and you can still, you know, maintain a balance without, you know, breaking the game.
Seagull, you look like you got something on your mind.
No, it's difficult to talk about, because all of my thoughts on this topic are relating to Overwatch 2. If you don't look like, it's so difficult to talk about, because ultimately these questions, these problems, all these issues that we bring up with the game, it's like, hey, people die really fast in this game right now. It's like, okay, these should all be planned. Like, this should be handled or responded to in some way for Overwatch 2, because if you think it's bad now, Overwatch 2 will probably just have a giant bundle of heroes when it drops, and there'll probably be like 5 of them or something. So imagine the shit show that's going to start when that happens. And if you don't start addressing it now, how much more insane is Overwatch 2 going to be? Because, yeah, and to me, you know, Overwatch right now, cool. Addressing these problems, cool. But like, you know, I'm worried about the future.
It's got to be now. I mean, there's a reason hero pools was tried this year. This is where, Freedo, I do disagree with you. Like, I think that this should be an experimental patch by the end of the summer. Like, what is the downside to doing it, to trying it? We literally just grab the list of every patch and DPS buff, even like the Zarya buffs. I don't think needed to happen, especially with Sig being nerfed. Remember the ones where she got better ammo efficiency and charged?
Yeah.
Like to me, when heroes like Genji and Zarya are neutral in the game, like that's kind of a good spot. What do we have to lose by throwing this on experimental? We made Moira the best hero in the game for a weekend. I've got to take a shot.
Well, we tried 1-3-2 on the experimental, so what's the difference in trying this?
It was fun stuff. It was cool stuff. Like, why not? Literally every DPS buff and hero that was been buffed to contend with double shield or goats, revert it.
So you guys realize that we have workshops. You don't actually have to like rely on Blizzard for this.
That's
why
true.
don't we just have someone do it and test it ourselves?
We'll get Andy. We can message. He did a Moira thing. I'll message him right now, actually. Let's see. Shout out to the Overwatch workshop, by the way.
I promise you that Blizzard would love to see you do it yourself. So that way, like, yeah, it's less work for them. They're like, fuck yeah, they're going to do it. Hell yeah. Like,
we'll message Andy right now. Hold on.
Well, people in my Discord, we do plugs on Fridays and Saturdays. So, and Fridays is reserved for experimental, where we try crazy shit. So guys, tomorrow, I think we know what we're doing.
I'm down. I don't do anything in my life anyway besides play Overwatch. So.
Oh, that would be amazing. If Samito, you were to join, that'd be amazing. Because I'd love for you to either play, watch, comment. That'd be amazing, I think.
Yeah, I'm down.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
And buff.
Because I think...
All right, he's here.
Sweet. Well, we're going to work on that behind the scenes, guys. We'll get to you. But on that topic, I mean, on the topic of releasing 5 heroes at once, I think one of the problems as well with a lot of the power creep and the new hero thing is that when one hero comes out, there's this intense need for that hero to either be like game breaking, or if they're not immediately meta, people are like, this is garbo, this is shit, and then the buffs start coming in, and then the creep starts happening, and then eventually 10 patches down the line, the hero is like really strong. Although, like you said, Seagull, they have reached this balance at certain points with someone like Ashe. Maybe having 5 heroes at the same time will avoid that problem, because we won't need to necessarily see all 5 of them go straight into the meta, for example.
I mean, just you keep in mind, like, you have Jeff Kaplan going into interviews and being like, yeah, we're rethinking just having barriers at all. Like, dude, we have actually no idea what this PvP will ever even look like in Overwatch 2. If they're having that level of conversations among themselves as designers, dude, we're like, what the fuck is happening? Like, we don't know shit.
Just no tanks.
Yeah, like, we don't know anything.
No healers. How about that?
We're
Good
killing
point.
Call of Duty. That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Soldier Biofield, only form of healing in the game. So
Yeah,
everyone huddling around that little circle.
I wish that they communicated more about these topics, but given they are revisiting some of, obviously, from the information that's given, they are revisiting a lot of those core tenets of the game right now. I can see why they might not want to get locked into things that they are experimenting with heavily. So I understand, but I still want to know more about what they're working on.
Yeah,
I agree. Scary stuff. There's no shields in the game. Oh my god.
Like at this point in my mind, when I see an Orisa or Sigma shield, it is not a shield. It's really just a Diva Matrix for like 2 seconds, because it's going to explode in about 2 seconds.
And it was never the barriers that made them strong. It was the grasp and the fortify and the immortality field, I guess, like combined with them. But like that was the reason.
I felt it was the range damage, because they were the only combo that had, among the tanks, that had true range DPS.
Well, they could do both at the same time. Well, they can do all 3 things at the same time. Actually, they could sustain a dive, poke, and shield off damage as well. I think I agree with you. I think the 2 strongest things though were like in my eyes were the was like the fortify and the poke. I guess you're right. The shields were never like, except for the first patch, they were a little strong then. But
yeah, the very first iteration. Oh man, was that 1200 HP Orisa, and now it's 600? Or
no, it was 9. It was 900 on a 7 or 8 second cooldown with 50% fortify damage reduction.
Oh god, there's been so many tweaks to Orisa I actually don't know anymore. Like there's been so many I don't know.
And that was I think that was right after, like a couple months, because she got her shield maneuver buff in April of 2019, like going into the patch that quote unquote killed Goats when Shanghai almost got reverse swept by Shock in the finals, where Goats was quote unquote dead right before World Q. I guess.
Yeah,
I'm
power.
sure.
That was the power of Nano Pharah, from what I remember.
Yeah, no, it was a very specialist team that had a great Doomfist player that could flex onto Brig, a good Sombra player, Sombra Widow player, and Ding on Pharah, who was just unbelievably talented. Like it was a treat to watch, but it was yeah, a specialist team anyway. Do you want to go to other DPS heroes? I feel like we're
yeah. I was gonna bring it over. So we kind of touched on Symmetra a little bit, but if you guys have any more thoughts, because we covered all the experimental card people, but before we move on to the other batch, any thoughts on Symmetra? Fine.
I don't think she needs to be buffed. I don't like that 2 to 4 second buff.
4 seconds is a long time, dude.
People do not understand. Like, so also I'd have to test this again. So it says you lose a stage over 4 seconds, right? That also means like, let's say you full charge, that's level 3. It takes 4 seconds to go to level 2, and then another 4 seconds to go to level 1. So she's always a heartbeat away from being back at full charge in the middle of a fight. Pretty sure that's how it works, and I have to go test it.
Don't buff DPS heroes anymore. No more. Don't do it. There's no reason to buff anything.
Sorry, well, I mean, go ahead, Freedo.
That's the kind of change where I'm saying, they heavy-handedly are saying the next tournament will not have double shield as meta, basically, or something. That's what they're trying to do anyway with that kind of change. Because, dude, the benefit of that is that she normally would have to position somewhat aggressively to keep that charge, and normally, well, you just don't want to die, so you just sort of lose it. But now you don't have to lose it, which means, like, in some cases, she will just be remarkable, because she already was pretty good on some maps. right? And now it's like so forgiving that it's sort of like having a Zarya instantly at full charge, right? Like just in the middle of the team fight. And if you don't delete her, and the weird thing is about this kind of thing is that I feel it has a disproportionate effect on in ranked play, actually, because at higher tiers and in pro play, like everybody knows you have to focus sim anyway. Like that was already the case. Now it's a bit more forgiving, but that forgiving factor I think matters more for the ranked player that, you know, is struggling to keep up with this team in plat, and, you know, where's the sim? I don't even know. The same thing happens with Reaper now, right? Where like these characters that just W at you and instantly kill you. So that's always my issue with some of these changes, where they're attempting to attack the meta at the higher tiers, but it's the type of change that I think affects lower tiers even more, which I don't want. Like, I don't want to see. I don't want to have to see people's VOD reviews of like, what do I do against this sim when my team doesn't turn around and I just get cooked for 10 minutes? Like,
you know, go next.
Sim is also, her audio is bugged, correct? Where her full charge has less audio than her initial charge, which means when she's full auto flanking you at a full charge, she has almost no sound at all. That is a big reason why she's so strong.
Oh,
is that a bug, or is someone in the Blizzard team just want her to be a ninja?
No, it's a bug.
I guess that PTSD of a rain game I had earlier today. I remember dying this sim. I didn't even hear her. Yeah, no, that needs to get fixed like immediately. Like that's game breaking.
But my personal thoughts on Symmetra are she's already really good on ladder. I've played her off and on since she was her initial rework. I think I have like 100+ games played with a 67% win rate. Like she's already really strong on a lot of different maps on ladder. I don't think she really needs to be buffed. If they did want to buff it, okay, sure, teleport cooldown. All right, that's whatever. But improving her primary fire, I can see like 2 to 3 or something, but 2 to 4 is like double. That's kind of intense. So I would be, yeah. I don't want to run to Steve-O now. He's like, good chat.
Dude, I literally have never beat the Steve-O Bastion once. Every time I pick it goes Bastion, no matter the map, I lose every game. Can't beat him.
Well, since you brought him up, let's head over to our Omnic boy then. I mean, Bastion, again, such a weird and in many ways divisive hero, because again, in sort of the metal ranks, diamond and below, people are like, I just can't deal with him. Once he gets on payload, I'm done. It's GG. Obviously, Steve-O aside, in sort of top 500 meta, it's not really an issue. So, where do we feel on him? Like, fine, doesn't need buffs, needs buffs. What's up? I mean, Samito obviously already said no one buffs, but changes anything?
I would say buffing him is possibly the worst thing they could do, and the buffs they've already put through is like already kind of suspect.
I'm sitting there, dude. Whenever I see a Bastion buff, I'm just like, what are you doing? I'm like, please don't do it, because no one is going to have fun. And the worst part is every low level player who runs into a Bastion, they're like 100 times worse to them, to the rest of the game, than it is to us. And if we hate them, they must really hate them. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. No one wants to see Bastion meta, because he is. It's really cool to see a Bastion every once in a while. Never any more than that.
That's what it should have been with Orisa.
They buffed his what's his tank ability called that reduces damage?
Oh yeah.
Ironclad, where he would survive a pulse bomb, and there was a Bastion meta for like a week, and everyone was just like, I remember was switching to Bastion off Reinhardt in my game because we didn't have a Bastion player, and he just carried the game. I actually walked into my roommate's room 2 weeks ago in Silver DPS. I see him switch to Bastion on Last Point Blizzard World, run behind the map, behind their entire team, post up in their spawn, and kill 6 people. And the other team was pissed. And I was just like, yeah, I don't even know what to say about that. Don't buff Bastion. Don't buff any DPS. There's no need to it. Like, just don't.
So
please.
In my mind, Bastion is the like pinnacle. Like, if I had to describe Overwatch, it'd be Bastion. Where like Overwatch has a lot of these really, really, really cool characters that are awesome, but if they're played all the time, it is a horrible gameplay experience, and they should remain niche. And I think there's more than just Bastion like that in the game. That like,
who'd you say?
Yeah, I think
Torb.
Yeah, there's more than just Torb, but if Torb ever became like super hard meta, he becomes a little bit obnoxious. Most of the time, these are characters who I would describe as noob stompers, or they fundamentally change the gameplay. there's other ones too, but Overwatch as a game lies in this zone of these characters are really cool to have as long as they're map and strategy specific and do not become overpowered. Because the moment they become overpowered, the beauty of Overwatch is a lot of these characters fundamentally change the game way more than any other game. Like, you're never going to see a character like Bastion and Hammond in the same game in anything else. Like, that's the beauty of Overwatch. But because of that, they have this very, very fine edge that they have to play on, which is why we always run into this shit show of metas like goats, like double barrier, because we have such a variety of gameplay styles. And so we live very, very carefully here. And yeah, just that sums up my thoughts. Just Bastion, please never be meta, but be in the game so I can run you in cheese comps and really niche strats. Thank you.
Agreed. All my arguments for Sim, Bastion accounts for that as well. And I think that already shows evidence of that point. One thing that's kind of interesting about him as a character is that really he hasn't got the same level of reworks that other characters have, but somehow has still seen like these little pockets of viability. Like, I mean, the grand finals last year, he was like, when shields were the strongest and lamp was the strongest, like Bastion could have his day, right? And those things kind of exist now, but Blizzard's trying to tune them back so much that you almost wonder, like, well, what environment will he ever be somewhat good in again? And so I wouldn't be surprised that if I should say, I would be surprised if he didn't get a rework come Overwatch 2 with the way that they want to balance everything. They sort of just left him to the side, like, well,
he's been reworked. I'm just gonna say it.
From original Overwatch.
The
shield.
He is
way
the
back.
first rework. He is the
Right.
first rework in the entire game.
Are you talking beta or are you talking when they removed his ability to headshot? Would you consider that?
Just all of it. He is the,
he had a
first
personal
rework.
shield.
He used to have his shield.
We don't talk about that. We don't.
I mean, more in the Bastion Torb era, but yeah. I feel like there was a philosophy change though at that time, right? Like that was different. But when they were reworking Torb and Sim and all them, like to make every hero good all the time, right? That's more what I mean. Like he didn't.
I know what you mean. You're right.
Well, Torb is in that now. Like I had a game today where I literally, it's okay. Torb, I think these heroes need to get addressed too, because like I literally on Junkrat Town, they tried to play like Doomfist the whole game. I just would plot my turret in the back of the map. I finished with over 70 limbs and 25,000 damage just from like plopping a turret over to the right and knowing where to position a poke. I literally just felt like I wasn't playing the game. We don't need to get into it. It was a very weird feeling to drop over 70 limbs and nearly 30,000 damage just from sitting in the back of the map. Boop, boop, Cheeto, turret. Like, it just countered them. I don't know.
Well, keep in mind that it's always weird as a developer to rework a lot of these characters because they're not really at all the same character they used to be. Like, original Torb was like, I'm gonna go upgrade my turret. I'm gonna get some scrap. I'm gonna like toss armor to my team, and that was the character, right?
Mm-hmm. And now it's I think that where he is now is way better, to be clear, but I think that it should get looked at as well as many other DPS heroes. If you guys could go in right now, let me know if I'm going off topic here, and nerf several DPS heroes, because I feel like we're kind of on the same page where it's like, all right, this role does not need buffs. I feel like that's one point that we could say right now.
Freedo would disagree.
Okay, Freedo's gone to the dark side. All right, Freedo's
Freedo killed the younglings. Freedo killed the younglings.
I'm grabbing Freedo from last year this time, and we're gonna put him on the map now. Okay. I feel like, let's say old Freedo and us say, okay, no more DPS buffs. The Sim probably doesn't need it. What are the 3 sleeper DPS heroes that are hiding behind everything else that are just too good that should be nerfed?
Sleeper ones
should be nerfed.
Well, not necessarily sleeper ones, but just your top 3 DPS heroes that you would want nerfed, because we're kind of on the topic of saying, all right, we would like to see DPS heroes nerfed. Freedo just doesn't think it's realistic, but you can still want it to happen, I feel like.
Have to think about this. I know who Ladder would say number one enemy right now is Genji.
Well,
he's been toned down
He
already,
did get toned down, but I still feel like people are really like now mad at the Nanoblade meta.
For just DPS characters, the number one complaint is typically Widow, just because no one likes to be one shot, but that's more of a redesign rather than just a nerf, because that's like her whole character.
It's also a high tier complaint. Like many high tier players say that, but like I don't, you know,
I
people
Zero
can't hit
other
anything
players.
at lower ranks, right? So it's like, it's not like Widow's a problem. Like Reaper's a bigger problem at lower ranks, right? And he's pretty balanced right now in the grand scheme. I hated Reaper for quite a while, but I've the power creep of the game's like gone past him enough that like he doesn't seem outrageous to me, but he was one of my bugbears, him and May, but they've reined both of them in a little bit. So it's tough for me to chime in on this question because I feel like everything would have to be nerfed, right? Like that's my whole premise of my argument for I don't know how to even do it.
So
I mean, I was gonna say let's go Widow, because I know Samito, you wanted to talk about that.
Chipsa, I'm sorry, brother. First of all, I'm sorry. I hate Widow in ranked is the most broken crap in the game. Okay, and here's why it's broken. The thing that makes me so mad is J3, right? He's like, oh my god, Doomfist is so much more broken than Widow. I'm like, dude, you realize how much harder it is to play Doomfist than Widow, and how much more? Name one situation where you have to mirror a Doomfist to stand a chance to win the game. But here's the thing about Widow: 2.5 times the crit rate of every other sniper in the game from any range. Okay, it is map dependent to be fair. Okay. But she's the only DPS in the game right now where on certain maps, if you can't mirror her, you lose. You can't beat it, but you can't nerf her either, which sucks, right? Because you just dumpster the hero. So like, what do you do? To me, give me Hanzo's projectile speed back. I'm coming back to my boy here. That's the only buff that I would accept at the cost of 2 storm arrows. I'd give that up.
Samito out here trading with Blizzard like it's cigarettes in a jail, but carry on.
How many more rebuffs will you allow if they buff Hanzo? Well, if you're trading over here.
I had my scare. This dude.
Okay, here's the point I want to make. I think part of the problem with a character like Widow right now is that the meta tanks are spam tanks, but they're really at medium range and their shields aren't very strong. So like Widow looks sick, especially in ranked, because if you just get a flank off or whatever, people don't have the coordination to like go together at the same time with that limited amount of defense. I wonder if like dive was better, then would Widow not feel like she just, can sit back easily and look down the line of sight? And because as a tank player, I feel it as well. Like getting pinged and not really being able to do anything. And if I go dive, I throw the game on the other end of the fight, right? So that I feel like she has an inflated power level based on the shield nerfs, but also the spam tanks being meta who, Sigma can interact with her a bit, but it's really not enough.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But also Widow was meta during dive. So keep that in mind.
Yes. Fact. Mercy, more so in the Mercy era though, because she could pocket her and res her and stuff. But
and Brig can't pocket people. Come on, Freedo. Brig looks across the map. Oh, there you go. One button, and she can do it 3 times, man. Come on.
Okay, yeah. So she'll still be strong, but my point is like I don't know if you would have to mirror her. Whereas right now, I feel like you can't even go full into that way. But on second thought, in Overwatch League, we've seen some teams commit to a full weird dive variant even now. So I don't even know. I'm second guessing myself even in that.
They do sometimes, but you're playing into a disadvantage because you have to rotate to set up for the Widow. So it might be depending on the map. Like Havana, I think is a big one. Listen, I know I'm memeing about Widow, whatever, but like the rotation that you have to make, like as somebody who played a lot in double sniper meta. Shout out to Cafriello. But the second that you're rotating to the Widow, like she has a time to kill you. So you're still playing into her hands unless you mirror her and can instantly headshot across the map. And again, it's tough because you can't nerf her without killing the character. I don't want the character killed, but I just wish there were a little bit more answers, to that.
Yeah, I'm a bit torn because on the one hand, I really agree with Samito because cards on the table, my secret agenda that I'm pulling for is one day in Overwatch where mirror picks aren't allowed. And you have exclusive picks. And in that world, Widowmaker is a real problem. Because, like Samito said, there's certain maps where she's like a hard must pick. But then at the same time, we're also said about earlier in the podcast how we really like balancing heroes where they're good on certain maps. We spoke about Pharah, like, yeah, she's a map-specific pick, and that's great for the game. So maybe it's fine that she's really, really strong, like a really good map-dependent pick on certain maps. So I'm quite torn. But, I don't know, I'll defer to you guys on this one.
I think it's healthier than other DPS that you could name. Like if Sim was as strong as Widow or something, right? We'd have a real problem. Whereas I at least feel the power you get out of Widow is more justified. So it doesn't bother me. But I also don't play against the Widows you guys play against as often, right? So if I did, maybe my opinion would be different. But like, you know, on my rotation of playing in top 500 lobbies, I definitely notice when a sick Widow's, I'm just getting pinged in the head constantly, and have to respect it so much more. So it clearly is a problem, but I don't know. I don't know how to fix it.
Yeah,
Eagle.
it's the fact that she just has so much mobility combined with being a sniper. I mean, they've toned down grapples so much over the years, but like, not actually that much. I think about it. I think they just changed the cooldown a couple times. But
It was better before at one point. I think it was as low. What is it now? 12?
It was 8. It was 8 seconds, I think.
Well, that was in dive era though, where like
That
if
was
you couldn't
dive
move,
era.
you got rolled, and then Mercy got buffed, and then it got to the point Seagull's talking about, where you could just pocket her. So again, it's like the context of the game. I feel does so much to her, because they did nerf her in the scope up time, right? Like I feel like that was really significant. It's part of the reason why you see Ashe more than Widow now. So yeah, maybe it is just that grapple hook cooldown they could change.
well, yeah, I don't know. She's such an impossible character to balance around, but we're very fortunate that it only impacts us and not the majority of the player base. They just get dinked every once in a while, or maybe they deal with a Widow Smurf and they get upset. But like, it's not nearly as obnoxious. So it becomes less of an issue, I think. And also, like you said, in the grand scheme of things, if a Widow pops off and is headshotting everybody, I'm actually kind of okay with that compared to like goats and other forms of gameplay. I'm like, yeah, I'm okay. Like, if you're gonna pop off that hard, like, okay, whatever.
That's fair. And at least it does require skill.
What about popping off at all them correct cooldown usages, Seagull? Don't underestimate. No, okay. Speaking of characters that people would delete, Doomfist. I think that's. I think all of like the people in my YouTube comments are begging me right now. Please mention Doomfist, delete Doomfist. Sam, you're obviously not for it.
Let's talk about Doom. So to be fair, I learned Doom recently, right? I didn't learn Doom.
He's not good.
He's not good. He's a terrible hero. He's like the amount of times I pick Doom and they have. He's one of the most counterable heroes in the game, and he's one of the most balanced heroes in the game. He's just annoying to die to. And people have to understand the difference between being annoyed that you're dying to something and something legitimately being broken. Okay, I'm going to quote Chips again here. The biggest counter to Doomfist is having a brain. And that's not that's the quote. That wasn't me. Okay. That was Chipsa. All right.
True.
But like, there's so many different things in this game to counter a Doomfist. There are so many things that you don't understand a Doomfist has to do to get value. Every single time a Doomfist is going in to get value, he is at high risk. You mess up one cooldown and you are feeding. Doom is a character that you have to play perfectly to maybe get value. And the only reason he was oppressive was because Orisa and Sigma forced every single one of his counters and Moira out of the game. And I'm not dissing on Moira right now. I'm saying like, because Moira was better than Ana, like the ability to stop Doomfist just wasn't really there. And I'm not saying that's good or bad, so that's not a shot for me later, all right? But it's just like, if you think Doom's broken, you've never tried to learn the character. There's so many times where this character just gets absolutely rolled. And that's from someone who got onto Doom more recently than, a traditional Doomfist, like, OTP or main or whatever.
The problem with Doomfist back in the day used to be that some of his abilities were just overtuned, like his punch. And so his risk versus reward, he's super mechanics, like he's pretty intense, but he did become like he's like the pinnacle of just like, dude, you hear like suddenly you just get punched, you get one shot, and you're just like, fuck that character. And it sucks because they didn't even aim. It could have just been like a Hanzo log, but instead it's a giant fist.
Yeah.
It's got the Infinity Stone.
Yeah.
Oh my god!
I think that hits the nail on the head, because I think characters like Widowmaker, Doomfist, and Hanzo they draw a lot of hate because of that mechanic of like, oh, I blinked and I'm dead, and I'm not sure why sometimes. And I think obviously Widowmaker the least, but Hanzo for sure. Where like I do this a lot. Chat will back that up. But like a tree trunk will come flying across the map, and I'm like, what the fuck was that? Like that wasn't even like for me. I think Doomfist has that same equation. So that, I think, is why people are so anti-Doomfist. But as you guys are saying, I don't think the hero himself is actually that much of a problem. I think it's just the way you die.
I totally understand that people don't like it. Like, I would be annoyed too. Like when I didn't know Doomfist back when he was overtuned, and I'd have a Doom come in on me and be like, dude, there's like, it's only really problematic at his skill ceiling, I feel like. or it was. It's not really so much now. Like, I can't play him in ranked. He's just not good. Your team can't follow up. He's good in team play, but if you're not putting Doom's only as good as the resources a team puts into him. It's that simple.
I just don't. He's in this weird spot where I don't know how he'll ever be a consistent meta pick without being just OP in a lot of cases.
He won't be,
because he is just based around just like, I'm just gonna CC you, I'm just gonna one shot you, I'm gonna roll you, and it reminds me it's like a much less intense version of Bastion, where if this character was ever super meta, that I hate it, but just not to the same extent.
One
I
cool
like
thing
seeing him
they
every once
tried-
in a while.
What they try to do is have more maps that work for him, right? Like that would be a good way to go about balancing. It's something that I wish they would discuss more, right? But it's just there's always so many more problems to deal with that maps don't even really get discussed. But I think he could benefit from new maps going his direction. He's also a character that I'll bring it back up again, but can benefit from power creep, because if you have a DPS hero that can like interact with Batiste Lamp, right? Like at these things, when I talk about like interactions like this, oftentimes it makes much more sense at like an average tier of play, because you guys are all right when you're like, well, he's bad now at higher tiers, but at a more average tier of play, the design of the game works way better, and to that extent, he can interact with certain things or reach those breakpoints that the power creep sustain in the game has really letting things get out of control. But a benefit is that if you want supports and tanks to get these power creep abilities in the game, if that's their goal for Blizzard, like we're going to make these new characters that have a lamp or Sigma's got grasp and all that, then all of a sudden Doomfist can be like not meta, but somewhat viable in the right contexts. Ideally, in like the ideal version of Overwatch, maybe in years' time, right? Where you can isolate a Sigma or isolate BAP based on just the matchup in the map, and like it can kind of be a meta check, if that makes sense. I'm not saying they succeed in doing that now, but it's in theory that's how it could work if it was all done really well. If that makes any sense.
I really like that point, actually. Like, just thinking about the idea of like, in a way, the way that someone in like Plat or Diamond plays Overwatch is a lot more resembling of what the vision of Overwatch was, of like, okay, well, they've got this hero, let's counterpick around this hero, and right. Like, we don't have an X player, how are we going to win? Whereas obviously the pro level, although mechanically they're playing the heroes at the quote-unquote perfect way, the problem is they just min-max it, so that they just play the same comp to the best ability all the time, or the same 7 to 8 heroes at the same time all the time.
They break the design because they can cover for each other, and like other teammates do the right role at the right time to cover for it. Whereas in ranked, you can like pick apart a person. Other thing, sorry to interrupt, but
no, go ahead.
Like back when Tracer was meta, right? Like Doom looked irrelevant, right? Whereas when we have more complicated abilities, then Doom's kit might have like some small glimpse of being usable in that complicated mess.
I think he's in the perfect niche. Like, to be honest, like I think, like Seagull talked about earlier, it's there are heroes that should be a niche. They have it. I think he has his. I think he's very map specific. I think in those close quarters maps, he can get a lot of value. And again, he is kind of, my roommate is, he was gold on console. He's 1900 right now on DPS. The hero I told him to learn is Doomfist, because it is a pub stomper. It is a positioning stomper, right? If you learn the game and do all these things, especially in the right maps, you can dominate the flow of the game. And I don't think that needs to get changed about him. I think he's fine where he is. And I think, I don't know. He's not OP. He's not broken. He's just annoying. And there's worse.
Is there a case for broken, or let's say, let me put it this way. Is there a case for heroes that are unfun to play against to be even weaker in like general ladder play? Because the points you're making are really valid, that like it's just not a problem for like players who know how to play. But for the players who struggle with the game and are the most likely to encounter Doomfist because of his current power level, is there a case to be made that because he's so unfun to die against, he should be even weaker, or so hard that you wouldn't even try playing him in Diamond or Plat?
I mean, then you're just asking about deleting him in a way.
It's that Diamond / Plat Doomfist is probably making so many mistakes as well that I don't know. If you can't punish a Doomfist in the state of the game, like unless he's getting full pocketed, even when I see a Doomfist get full pocketed like a high level play, which is the only time that you really see that happen, there are plenty of answers to it. So no, I think he's no.
ultimately he's just a design of a character who's almost impossible to balance. I have no idea how they're supposed to do it. So I hope he remains a little bit niche, but yeah.
He needs to niche and he's fine.
Reminds me a little bit of Sombra, actually.
Yeah.
I hope Sombra never becomes meta either, for another reasons.
Oh God, playing it.
People forgot about Sombra metas. At least Sombra has a niche of like, if you want to make an ult-based team comp, you will go Sombra. And I mean, that's kind of how it works, right? You have to, your entire team now plays around EMP, but it's a thing. So
2CP especially, I think it's strong.
Well, let's talk Sombra then. Yeah, I mean, you guys don't want to see her ever kind of. I mean, I know Samito, you don't want anyone buffed, but you guys don't want to see her kind of change at all because you don't want to see her in more games, basically.
You know what I didn't like? Curious your all's thoughts on this. What did y'all think about the permanent stealth?
doesn't matter. I don't care. I'll play Sombra.
Freedo?
I don't know if it made too much of a difference. It's another one of those things where, like, it unfortunately it took away something at the higher tiers, and which was like tracking her and the timing of it to make her more universally viable, which I think we all kind of agree is a bit of a mistake, right? To be able to do something all the time, it's kind of against what I think ideally Overwatch should be balanced towards. So that's kind of the thing. She's been pretty niche and I think weak, and in fact at some tiers of play like terrible. I would go as far to say at like
lowest win rate, didn't she, in the game at 49%?
Owl can play her now somehow, right? With but that's just like the power of teamwork, right? And how it scales. And so at some tiers I just think she's a horrible character because people just don't know how to use her right, or your team just gets run over, right? Because that's the problem with her. That pros understand this and know this. If you see a Sombra on the enemy team, one thing you can do is just run her team over because she just doesn't have anything to stop you from doing that, really.
Yep.
But the way that the pro teams successfully don't get run over is that they position better, and they play more mobile characters that don't get run over. So just the positioning game is way better. Whereas in ranked, it's just like a completely different world. So I would prefer if characters were balanced like confidently for the competitive scene. So despite my pro power creep rants and everything, I'd be fine if characters were like niche and ranked all the time, and I wouldn't lose any sleep at night. And I think we've had that kind of with Sombra, and nobody's really batted an eye, right? Like in the side, sort of like Bastion being kind of bad, right? Like nobody really minds in ranked anyway.
My thoughts on Sombra are, because of her ultimate and because of how she's used, she's a very team dependent character. So if she ever becomes meta on ladder, which is inherently a not big on teamwork place, then that she's probably busted. Like that's just how she works. So it's particular for low level players, like Samito talks about the perma stealth. To me, that just was a way to, how do we improve her low level win rate, or like how do we make this better for a new player? It's like, well, maybe we give her perma stealth. Like, does it really matter for a high level player? Maybe a tiny bit, but it doesn't really change her because the high level players are playing around like hack and EMP. So it's that sort of thing.
I have this might be like a really hot take. I actually think the permanent stealth for low level players is like a trap. It's like a sneak nerf. Because I tell you, 9 out of 10 Sombras at Plat just stay cloaked forever. They never uncloak.
Okay,
they never uncloak.
Right.
They just never build ult charge. So if you actually gave them the timer, they would have to shoot. But I've seen so many Sombras at Plat, and they just never decloak. And they're like 4 minutes in and they're 10% ult charge.
I think you're actually right. I never thought about that. I think you're right.
Well, it makes sense because when we would play triple DPS comps into goats at one point, back like Triumph season 1, I tried the Sombra, and it was incredibly, I know this is at different level of play, but the hardest part about her was, and this is what I think Dante does so well for Houston and why he's so good and why their Sombra comps work so well, is like he knows exactly when to get in and out, and you do it as much as possible to farm that EMP. And it was so difficult. I honestly, that might be why her win rate is so low. 1, team oriented, like Seagull said. too, like the knowledge about when to come in and out of cloak and actually spray without dying and go for hacks without dying, like that was hard. And like I couldn't do it. Like they were like, yes, Sam, you can't play the Sombra. Like go play Hanzo, you one trick. And I'm like, all right. I was like, all right, whatever. I'll click heads instead. Okay, but yeah, no, that was. I think you actually might be right on that. That is a crazy sleeper take that I think should actually get looked into.
Yeah, mind blown. I actually completely agree. Now I think about it, I totally agree.
It's that problem entirely. I didn't know it went that far and down the rabbit hole, SVB, but it's that problem where I'm like, typically in ranked, unless you're playing with a really good Sombra who's like calming, it just feels like your team takes more damage than the enemy team, basically, unless people actually know how to play around it. I like having a good Sombra in my team because like I know what you're supposed to do, but I don't think most players do. So.
Yeah, I think she's a fun hero to play, but nobody really wants to play against her, basically. Nobody wants to get hacked and EMP'd all the time, so it's fine, I think, as is.
It would be a cool benchmark to have heroes be balanced by, honestly. Like, if we were fine with more heroes being in that Sombra, like, Sombra, Pharah level of, like, good map, good teamwork, it gets the most out of them. Like, that's probably a good base point for the game, especially for some of the more obnoxious ones. And I think those two are, actually, for a lot of players.
Well, okay. Well, let's move on to the next. Similar stylistically, let's say, to Sombra, and Samito brought up Dante. So let's talk Tracer, because that's a sort of similar style of the kind of in and out, zipping around in your backline, but kind of an ever present in Overwatch history. But how does she fare now?
Seagull, this is all you, bro.
Historically, she has been the most overpowered character in the game. And the only actual, like, in my mind, proof of power creep is they had a buffer. Like, that's it. Power creep exists. Open shut case. It's over. They had a buff Tracer. She's just so obnoxious as a character. I hate her.
Well,
she will probably, if, in my mind, if DPS characters are ever good, then she is probably going to be meta at some point just because of how much outplay potential she has, but she is just so obnoxious to play against. There was such a long time period in dive meta and for the first couple of years of the game where sustain was not so high, where the only counter to a Tracer was like your own Tracer zoning them out or preventing them from pathing to certain areas to set up a dive and stuff like that, because nothing can stop her except, well, herself. So it just, yeah, she's a really weird character to talk about, because during her height of her power, her pulse bomb was anti-tank. It still kind of is, and so you have a Tracer in the back line who's designed to kill your supports, whose ultimate comes up like every 45 seconds. That was designed to just completely demolish your tanks. These days we have more things like Fortify, right? Where your Orisa can just tank it, your Sigma can just eat it. So it's a little different.
Just eat it, Fred.
Yeah. So it's a little bit easier, I think.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head about power creep. Like the fact that we had to buff Tracer is case closed on that front. I think, again, I'm gonna say the same thing. Her buff needs to be reverted. Like these heroes were only need to be buffed because of heroes like Brig, Bap, Orisa Sig dominating the game. If those heroes fall back, that's when these heroes actually have a chance to oppress the game. And when it's single target healing with Ana was meta, like Tracer, like the amount of the impact her decision making could have on the game was like game winning, right? And that's kind of where I want to take the game back to, not necessarily using Tracer's hands, but like not to the extent as it was, but I wish that individual decision making could have a greater impact on the game, and a hero like that has a place in it. But right now, I think it's too strong, and I think she's in a decent spot if you're good with her. I absolutely don't buff her though. Revert the buff and then see what happens when a lot of these characters get tuned down. And then if she needs changes after that, we can look for it.
Time to devil's advocate, because the start of power creep was because Tracer was too good. And this is what has converted me to the dark side, because back when the game was more about FPS, the character that did that the best was just the best all the time, right? So Tracer was just godly, and I remember Seagull talking about how, they won't nerf her because she's on the box or whatever, right? Back in the day, and that's sort of the problem. Now, well, you've got so many tools, whether it's the AoE healing to stop her poke, lamps. Torb's pretty good against Tracer all of a sudden randomly, right? Like there's a lot of these decent to great answers to a character that's pure FPS spin in a circle Quake, basically, which I like too, which is why I don't like hard disagree with you guys when you say that. But I just want to remind that the power creep journey began with Brig in order to stop Tracer from running circles around everybody. So the way I see it working is that we can Blizzard and Overwatch can kind of have its cake and eat it too, where we can discuss Widowmaker being maybe overpowered and Ashe being sick and Tracer being sick and Genji being sick, while also having all these buttons that stop you from dying to those things. And I think like that's the only way that Overwatch can function as a game. Unless you want it to be back to Tracerville, you know, like if you want it to be that, that's fine. But I think we have other games that are trying to accomplish that.
Seagull, you want this one, or I can get him?
Get him? What do you mean? Relax.
Freedo, okay, Freedo, listen. I disagree with you on this because you easily could have nerfed Tracer slightly and slightly buffed her counters that were made obsolete because of D.Va's buffs. So if you want to say power creep started with Tracer, with Brig because of Tracer, I could say that power creep started with when D.Va was buffed a lot. Like what was her DM was crazy, wasn't it?
4 seconds.
She had 4-second DM.
4-second DM. I think it was, what is it now? 10 meters? Was it 15 or 20 meters?
Keep in mind that not only was it longer range, but also bigger because
you couldn't see it.
Because you think of it in terms of a cone, instead of just keeping the cone shape and making it reduce range, they cut the cone in half. So your area is actually smaller.
Okay. I forgot about that. I don't even remember some of the old D.Va stuff. But I don't know. That's all I got on that one, Freedo.
But all I was going to say was I agree that, yeah, the counters Tracer and the rise of Brig and everything that came afterwards. Yeah, I think that was probably the biggest turning point in the game. But I think instead of making counters to Tracer that are just like, I passively counter this character via existing because I have incredible AoE sustain and passive armor and things like that. Stuff like a Torb turret is also a little bit passive, but at the same time, you can play around it a little bit. And I think going and moving into that direction of like, we have a Tracer on the enemy team who's really good. I can go Torb and put a turret up to try and zone out that Tracer because he's a small aimbot in the back line that will just help him out and try and poke out the Tracer a little bit. Stuff like that's a lot healthier for the game, obviously, than just adding like, yeah, we're just gonna add all this AoE sustain and then whoops, we actually made goats. See you next year.
You're completely right. I just have to always try to devil's advocate on this show, otherwise we'll all just be relentless.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a good point.
Like if McCree's fire rate buffs were back in dive era, we didn't even need Brig. But
not even the fire rate, the roll. They doubled his roll distance, didn't they? He goes really far.
Lowered the cooldown for sure.
Like 4 seconds.
And as you said, the Torb rework.
Yeah, how about making an anti-dive hero McCree, where like if they have a Tracer, you just go McCree and he has 225 HP and a bigger roll. It's like, okay, there's a lot of different ways you could go that isn't just add Brig, nerf her 22 times. Hey guys, she's still meta. Like, I don't know.
You're right.
Let's talk McCree.
We still have Brig. That's my only issue. We still have Brig. So we live in a world with Brig. I feel like we can't divorce her, you know, and reverse the clock and put the Torb and McCree reworks back in that era instead of them making a meta changing hero, because they listened to people saying we got to change the meta. It's dive every time. So they gave us Brig.
I mean, speaking of like counters, I thought it would be a good time to bring up McCree because I mean, in the let's say the pantheon of original Overwatch counters, it was always they have a good Tracer, go McCree. That's not so much the case right now. I mean, is our little cowboy struggling?
I think he's good. I think he's better than in a long time.
Yeah, I think he's really strong. He just isn't as strong as Ashe or Widow is on certain maps, but he's definitely really good in ranked, I would say. Maybe the pros can't find use for him just based on the stats of what Ashe can do, but I think he's fine.
I think his power rate, yeah. In my opinion, his power creep is in his fire rate. I appreciate the fact that over the years they buffed his high noon, so it wasn't such a feeder ultimate. I think that's great. I think it's like it's still easy to play around. It's it'll actually destroy your team if you mess up, and I think that's good. I just wish that he didn't shoot so fast, because he's one of those characters where it's the shield goes down, suddenly McCree gets 3 shots on you before you're around the corner instead of 2, and now you're just gone. So
agreed.
To tone back his fire rate.
You have to do it.
I think old fire rate for McCree. Yeah, I think that the time to kill with new McCree and that fire rate gets really intense with good McCree players for sure. But I think overall he's in a good spot for ladder. He's fun to play. He doesn't feel super unfun to play against. It's like he's just McCree.
Yeah, I think the discussions in McCree are, it's hard because like you guys said, it's just that other people are so much stronger that you forget that McCree is actually pretty good as well. The question I'd ask is where would you pick him? Like what is his zone? Why do you pick McCree over someone else?
Frontline pressure and zoning out long range snipers.
I would disagree on the long range snipers, but I thought his original role was going to be the duelist who goes on flanks, because you have flashbang and you're going to mess up anybody close range, and that was like the minor flanks, so things like controlling hotel on King's Row, stuff like that. Just be like, if they have McCree, that's terrifying. One roll over, flashbang, right click, you're gone. He has that passive threat on tanks, like you did say though. Frontline pressure, stopping flankers, I think is like his original design. These days, I don't think he should ever really pressure snipers, because he does have heavy fall off. Like he can pressure them a little bit, but he's never going to be able to like dumpster unless he's like chaining headshots. So,
well, what I mean by that is like he's the only one that can do the frontline pressure as well. Yeah, flankers. I should have said that. You're right. And kind of zone them off at the same time, because I can't think of another hero that can at least sometimes, it's not ideal for sure, contest a sniper. I'm not obviously not maps like Havana or things like that. It's like impossible. But I'm thinking like if you're pushing Kings or like you said, and there's a Widow up on the high ground in that first point window when you're attacking, I can break both shields, right? Because I'm not a good Widow player. I can't do it. But I can break both shields in McCree, pressure the front line, and after the front line backs off, I can shoot a Widow and zone her off, right? And at the same time, I do think he's really, I would say he's the most consistent DPS in the game right now. One of them, besides like maybe I think Torbjorn in ladder. Torbjorn I think is really, really good. A sleeper pick as well. I think McCree's all like you get a McCree in your team. It's not like, okay, this game's lost. We have a McCree. It's like he does his job. He's good.
Yeah, he's a very much a generalist.
Mm-hmm. As he should be.
Freedo, anything to add on that?
McCree's tough. I think to him from a tank point of view, which he kind of just rolls tanks really easily. So in the DPS battle, he's definitely fair, but that's one area where the power creep of his firepower definitely has hurt tank players, because they make his stun was already good against tanks, and then his right click got better at some point. Again, I can't remember what buffs they made exactly, but they made it incredible, and his fire rate's incredible. But I also think it's balanced for the state of the game, and just like the way you have to approach as a tank is just totally different now than what it used to be. Like in the dive era, Winston could dive McCree and bully him out, and then Tracer would crossfire and he's just dead. But in this era now, it's more about like you need to get your cooldowns in the right spot. Like Winston is somewhat playable now, but it's more about like placing his bubble and zoning an area rather than actually committing, because if you do that, you'll just die. Which is the only reason why like some pro teams are playing him right now. Otherwise, like fear what he can do when Sigma gets nerfed or something, right? Like he's one of those characters that I think is going to come out of the woodwork as being really sick, because he like cleans up fights faster than Ashe. Like Ashe is better at the poke phase of the fight, but McCree, when it's when kills are traded a little bit, then he's a little scarier in my opinion, because of just how quickly he taps you, and he doesn't have to scope, and he has the stun that comes back on cooldown. So low key might be one of those guys that rise a little bit, but balanced as far as balanced characters are right now.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And as a tank player, I can't believe I forgot all the times I got McCree clicked to death. But yeah, I think he's probably fine as is. Okay, well, I mean, let's make the lore connection that we've got his Overwatch buddy Gabriel Reyes, aka Reaper. How do you feel about the edgelord himself?
Noob stomper, very much a noob stomper, but honestly, over the years, his power creep is one I've always been okay with because he was just so garbage to begin with. Like, he was never good. So slightly buffing him to make him actually good. Like, it wasn't like he was already great and became super crazy. It was like, all right, we'll make his shift cancelable so that way he can threaten you in close range. We'll give him Shadow Step can actually be used now. It's like, oh wow, that ability actually works. Weird. You know, it's stuff like that. Like, I'm okay with Reaper. He was OP when his lifesteal was 50, but he feels good now. Like, maybe not like good on ladder, good like in the meta or anything, but playing against a Reaper, his ultimate's always a threat. He can Shadow Step. He's just spooky man instantly, just rolls you. He doesn't feel like crazy unfair. His time to kill's too high. He just feels usually pretty good.
I agree with you. I do pick him sometimes. Like when I play against Fitzy, like sometimes when you know they're gonna have Sombra here like that.
Oh
like,
yeah.
I think he's better than McCree in that aspect if you're mirroring double shield, because you just rip their shields. There's nothing they can do about it, right? The one thing I didn't like that they changed about him was the invisibility with his TP. I thought it just removed counterplay. I think they could have just sped it up, but the new functionality of it was great, and the ability to cancel Wraith was also great. So I do think he's in a good spot right now. Noob Stomper. I would like to revisit the invisibility part of the TP rather than just speeding it up, because it was very hard to time at one point. But I think it's very, very on the low end of problems right now. That's not even worth visiting until we do a bunch of other stuff.
Possibly one of the better advocates for good power creep, because I thought when they first reworked him, he was just outrageous for normal ranked play. Again, remembering that at higher tiers, everyone has better mechanics anyway, but at lower tiers, playing Reapers, not much harder. So the things that should counter him don't at lower tiers, and he was already good there, which is why I kind of didn't want him to get buffed. But now I think he's fair at just about all tiers, thanks to how strong everything else is. So yeah, somehow still decent, but not standing out too much.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think like everyone else has gotten stronger, so we kind of forgot about him. And for now, the beast is tame, but we'll see if he's unleashed it again at some point. Because I still get people asking me about, like, what do you do when you're Reinhardt and there's a Reaper coming M1ing towards you? And I'm like, I guess you just die. I don't know.
Well, some of it is their mechanics as well, right? Like, anyway, I'm not going to get into it, but to some degree, you kind of deserve to die to Reaper, but there was periods where like his stats were just insane. And even if you did kite him, like, because Ryan didn't always have the move speed, for example, to kite Reaper, like that was a good change, right? Like there's so many things that get changed all the time around these things. So yeah, there's ways to outplay him now.
And just to clarify, guys, when we say noob stomper, we don't mean like I hope you definitely get stomped by Reaper. It's more just if you're losing to this character, it's probably because there's a lot of shit going wrong in the first place. So if you stop doing those things wrong, you'll find that character gives less value. So it's not like we're encouraging you to or rooting for you to die to Reaper. It's just it's part of the process.
It's one of those characters where he's very new player friendly and effective. So when we say noob stomper, we just mean like he's a very easy to pick up character to learn how to play and get success with. That also is just really, really good at abusing low level mistakes like, what the hell, Reaper can TP? Like, what's a Reaper ult? Then suddenly your whole team's dead. Like, yeah.
By the way, how many more do we got to go? Do we want to pick up the pace with these a little bit?
Yeah. I think we only have three. So we got Junkrat, Mei, and Genji left. So since we were speaking about, I was gonna say since we're speaking about low-level stompers, let's talk Junkrat.
Too good.
Deserves buffs. Deserves to have 4 mines. No, I think he's actually like redonkulously OP, but somehow just based on the power creep of the game, like no one's complaining about him. But I think he's stupidly strong.
So I think he's map dependent when it comes to spam, and also my chat is pointing out we did forget Soldier.
Yeah.
He
Sorry,
is so
Soldier,
shit we forgot him in the corner. But Junkrat is one of those characters who leads to super obnoxious gameplay because there's nothing worse than sitting at a choke as Junkrat sits there and spams you down. But he also does have clear counters. Like it's not like he will ever be good versus Pharah. He'll never be good versus Sniper unless he's solo flanking. I don't think he needed 140 damage. I don't think he needed his concussive mine distance to be buffed, so that way he can sit further away and still like the main point of Junkrat is he can combo you. I don't think the effective range of his combo should have been buffed to that extent. I don't know if he really needed yeah, there's a lot of stuff with him where he's been tweaked or adjusted to be slightly buffed over the past year or so. I think he is very much a noob stomper, really, really good at any choke point versus a huge variety of team comps, actually. He's definitely a sleeper pick for ladder, I think.
There's some maps where that distance on the mine like really shows. Like Lijiang Control Center, he was already pretty good there, but it's just like you so easily can hit a combo from miles away, and they can't really stop it. So
same with Anubis. First point, he can now sit on the platform and throw mines easier as people try to cross into the chokes on left and right.
I love it because he's one of the only DPS I can actually play to a decent degree. So I eat that SR up, baby. But that, yeah, the fact that like there isn't riots in the streets with how strong Junkrat is surprises me actually, because at lower tiers anyway. I don't know. I'm surprised we don't hear more complaints. Is what I'm trying to say.
I feel like he's just played at such a niche rate that it's hard to see it, and a lot of people haven't given him the time of day to play him. But at least at high level play, the amount of Junkrat players I've seen just shoot up the ladder, and that's a really big indicator. A lot of the times, it's like when you see a lot of these like pretty good players who are who main the character that are consistently in top 500, all of a sudden they're maintaining top 50, like, you know, throughout the whole season. You're just like, okay, like it's noticeable. I think it's not beyond broken, but it definitely needs to be toned back.
An interesting thing, sorry, just real quick. Like when Orisa Sig got reworked for the shields to be weak, but their cooldowns to be insane, like then Junkrat couldn't really spam into Sig because you just gave him 800 health. But then he got buffed to it's this little thing called power creep. We've spoken about it a couple times. Anyway, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say I agree with Samito on I used to have this theory about a year ago that a character's off meta. If you want to know how strong a character is, you just count the amount of one tricks in top 500 that season. And that is actually how strong a character is, because there's a ton of, I always look at it as there's a ton of one tricks for every character in the game. And the more you have of them that are suddenly appearing in top 500 means that character is sleeper good for ladder. Might not be in pro play, depending on combos, teamwork, this sort of thing. But specifically for ladder, like, yeah, like it's suddenly if you see like a few more one tricks, you're like, I can now play that and I'm probably going to pop off. So.
Yeah, I think
there's a lot of good matchups, basically. Like, he can kind of fight Genji pretty well because he's got a lot of annoying things, and Genji's sick. So, like, the top players really are sick at the flanking style. And now that they improved his mines so that he can jump better and also snipe you with it, just means, like, a good Junkrat can feel useful at all stages of the fight, pretty much, and contribute something.
Yeah, he's another hero I wonder if Blizzard kind of wish they could have only played on something like defense, because I think, again, if you're trying to make Junkrat viable on attack, he's probably going to be stupid, and that's kind of where
I go silly all the time. It gets the triple mine tire. What do they do? Lose. You know?
One of the strongest areas you see him on is stuff like even Anubis offense and Dorado offense on first point for each. They're both so obnoxious to play against. Like if you're Dorado on defense and suddenly the enemy team is a Junkrat and he sits there and holds left click at the choke, like it's such a perfect angle for him to control it. And then all that Junkrat has to do is like he pushes up, he takes over a flank on the right. No one can push a Junkrat in a small hallway. It's very obnoxious, but he's definitely a sleeper pick, I think. Pretty good. And I do agree he's been power crept, I think, so he should be toned down. Like, why 140 damage? Should just go to 120, you know? Like, we don't need that much spam. Why did we have to buff that? Like, come on.
It sort of made sense when Brig had 250 health and all this armor. Like, I could see the route they're going, but that's one of those things that's like an oversight, right? Like, Brig's health's going down, but we're going to keep some of these damage picks high for no reason.
Freedo, the mistake there was Brick. Literally, though, the reason we've had to talk about every single poke here that we said has been buffed, like it stems back to Brick, all of it. So
you break every breakpoint in the game, Sam. Makes the game hard to balance. You don't say.
We'll be here for 2 hours. We don't need to go there.
Well, speaking of sleeper picks, the one we all even slept on. Let's talk our boy Legs, Soldier. Samito, you got to take this one, surely.
I've had my fair share of escapades on the Legs. I think honestly, he's fine where he is. I would like to revisit his Helix buff when everything else in the game gets nerfed to see, kind of where it stands. I mean, aimbot in a first-person shooter, Transcendence on a 15-second cooldown for your team. You get caught in a graph, pop that biofield down, you're farming aimbot, and your whole team lives, especially with an on a nade. But no, I think he's a fun hero. I think he's in a good spot right now. See where he lies if we tune everything back down. And if he's still too good with his Helix rocket damage, then take a look at him. Otherwise, I think he's in a good spot.
Yeah, I would generally agree with that. I think he is also another example of power creep, like the Helix and the 1920 buff combined, and
I forgot about that.
He's pretty intense compared to where he used to be. But it's just it's so much in the game has been buffed that's sort of like where he has to be in order to be viable at all. So
I think he just can't match. You look at break healing, and I think another one is BAP healing, like AoE burst healing. Like his level of damage just can't really compete, which is why the Helix had to be buffed. So he had some form of burst.
I know. It's just it's just I know what you mean. He had to get those in order to remain viable. I know. But he's always going to be niche. It's like some characters can be in a good spot but not be meta right now, and that's okay. And I feel like Soldier is one of those examples. If we're in a meta where a lot of it comes down to we need more burst damage, like Soldier should not be meta, and that's okay because that's not his thing. Like he's not going to be like, I'm just going to one tap you, like unless he directs you with the Helix, but in which case just don't get hit by it, I guess. But
no, you're right.
Cool balance point about him is that he's easier to play. So like he's always going to be a bit more approachable for a lot of players across the skill gradient. I feel like he has a cool interaction against McCree because he kind of outranges him a little bit at like that perfect distance. But because he has to flank really to get value nowadays, there's just other characters that'll do that better. And so, yeah, it's crazy how the stats he has now, thinking back to when he was meta, like if he had those stats then, it's just kind of mind blowing the way the game's evolved over time.
Yeah,
he's always been the flank god. No, sorry, I'm done.
No,
he's just the flank god.
Remember Soulcree? The dude would run around on Soldier, the first Metro. Good times.
These East Coasters, I don't know him. I know Calvin. Sorry. He's either Soldier or McCree. And he just runs around. It's like, oh god, here he comes.
Yeah, I mean, I think with him being literally the tutorial character, he's a good entry point. And I think he's also another one of those characters that suffers from the perception issue, which is something surprising we haven't really spoken much about. But I mean, it's something that Blizzard alluded to when they had that infamous kind of statement where they were like, actually, Genji and Soldier are the 6th and 7th best, win rate. And everybody for like a week, everybody's like, let's lock the legs, let's go. And I think he would get played more if people were like not so averse to the idea that he could be played, I think. So it's one of those perception things again.
In ranked, I think he's fine. And especially if you have a player who isn't going to play Ashe to like a level to actualize her, then Soldier I feel is easier. Just like aim towards the thing. I don't know. I think Ashe takes more aim basically, but when you do have that aim, then Soldier can't match her nearly as well.
The whole
they do very similar jobs.
The whole ladder win rate thing is always weird to talk about because it's like matchmaking isn't really great when you start looking at like win rates at GM plus because the pool of players is so small, but the skill disparity is so high. It just gets really weird to talk about. It's like, yeah, okay, an Overwatch League DPS could probably just go play Soldier and stomp like 70% of their games because half his games have master players in them. And he's like 4.5. And it's like, okay, but does that mean that Soldier is really, really good? Or is it just that he's playing a lot of bad players a lot of the time? I don't know. Like, I don't have full access to all these stats. But regardless, most of the time on ladder, your hero pools don't actually matter. It's a hard topic to talk about because ultimately, I think the most impactful hero choices are almost always tanks because they determine everything else. So.
Yeah, agreed. Something we touched on in the Great Tank Debate as well. Anything else to add to Soldier before we move on? No? Alright, well, we've got 50-50. Chat was taking gambles on who's going to go last, but we'll go with the devil herself, Mei. And again, surprising perhaps how much people hate Brigitte, that when we were talking about horrible characters to play against, no one mentioned Mei yet, but the original God, please delete this character, I hate her, Mei. What do we think?
They did a pretty good job balancing her back, to be honest. It's interesting how the strength of like Reinhardt changed her power as well, especially in Overwatch League. You can kind of track this where if Ryan was banned, they couldn't really play the Mei style, or it looked way, way worse after the Mei nerfs anyway. And also with Lucio being weaker. So like, I feel she's fairly balanced. She may creep up again if like Brig goes down and Lucio goes up, because then you can execute her brawl setup play more. But I kind of like the strength level of the wall. I think it's like fair. If it was any weaker, it probably doesn't do anything. And you can actually shoot it now, which feels good. You can shoot it, get through, and so if you coordinate great with Mei, then you get her to work, and if you don't, you get wrecked. And yeah, I feel she's properly balanced for the most part right now.
That's a polite way of saying if Ryan isn't being picked, there's no one for her to bully. But yeah, I mean, I think Samito, you have thoughts on Mei, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, she is one of the only characters I'd like to see reworked for Overwatch 2. I just think the freeze mechanic itself, I think something better could be there, and we've taken her away from. She was really bad at the start because all of her power was in her CC, and she just could not duel people like at all, which is why she was a gimmicky pick on. No one knew how to beat her on Hanamura defense first point, right? Or Icon wall first. Wasn't the staircase on the side. I think that I don't think she's in a problematic place right now, but I don't really like what she does to the tank role in particular. And I think that it can be improved upon, but I don't think she's super broken.
Seagull?
I think she is in a good spot if she's map dependent. So if you see her commonly played at choke points and then swapped off, or alternatively against death balls and then swapped off, I think she's in a good spot. The problem became, in my opinion, the reason why she became so meta for a while is because the game became all about like, I'm trying to remember back. There was like this short time period where like Mei was really, really good on ladder versus most ladder comps trying to play goats during that era. And then afterwards, it was like a lot of Orisa until 222 locked in. And versus all those comps, she was just, that's her natural place, is to be really, really good against like, oh, this whole team is playing as a blob. Like I can just cut them in half. Like, okay, that's what I'm supposed to be good at. And so I feel like she got a bad reputation because of that. It's like, oh, she's so overpowered. And so they had to nerf her a lot to make her more and more balanced because of all these different, yeah, she as long as she has specific areas she works in, I mean, it's sort of like, I'm like the broken record here. I'm just repeating the same thing over and over. If a character in my mind is balanced, it has to be used situationally in areas they're supposed to be strong in. And if they're used all the time as a generalist character, 24/7, no matter what, like that's where you run into problems. Because in my mind, there are generalist characters like McCree, right? Where like he's never really that bad, but in a lot of scenarios, I can probably pick a better character, and that should probably be how the game is played in my mind, or like that should be the goal of the design and the balance team to strive for. And I think they've done a pretty good job with Mei, moving her and toning her back where she was actually just used everywhere because she had sustain, she had AoE freeze, she could brawl, she could poke down a sniper because she had no fall off. Her wall was way too good, and they did tone her down. And now on ladder, personally, I don't actually see her that often. I don't know why, but I don't, even though she is still really good on maps like King's Row, but she's much more niche, and I think that's a good thing.
They finally came around to make her make sense in 222, I feel, because when they swapped over, her balance state was to combat goats in the open queue format, and then they put it into 222, and it's like, well, we can run another tank, basically. Like, we can just go back to playing goats again, yay. And it's an interesting thing to think about, the value characters have when they can influence the objective, like to a severe degree, and that's what Mei could do. She can allow you to have your DPS slot also play the objective with the tanks, and that has since been reined in to be more reasonable. But even in a weaker state, she still does that a bit, and like you can get a lot of guaranteed point control, like you're saying, like Kings, like you can just stall up the cart for a while, and maybe you just win based on time bank, even if you're not like dominating the team fights, right? So it's sort of like an alternate win condition. Another problem, again, I always come back to maps, but if we had different map types where it wasn't single objective all the time and there was different ways to play the game, balancing might be a little easier on them. And I wonder if that's something they'll do in Overwatch 2, because having everything always be like a payload or a point where you all fight together and it's just team fight simulator and all the maps are kind of similar with just different geometry, that has kind of been a challenge for the balance of the game and the diversity for that matter.
I very much disagree.
Yeah.
I believe there's tons of map diversity in the game, and I think the only reason you started seeing death ball objective based team comps get played is specifically because sustain and power creep led to it. Before that, you did have map. Like, go back to Overwatch League Season 1, go look at how many different team comps are played, like, on a map-to-map basis. That was how the game actually was. Like, it's not a, oh, we just got better, we learned to go to the point. It's like, no, the Brig got added, AoE healing got added, that allowed you to do that. Before, you would just get rolled if you did that. And I would know, because I was one of the few teams who was without a Tracer player for about a month in Overwatch League Season 1 and was forced to, for weeks in scrims, to try out full Deathball GOAT style comps. And we failed against Dive over and over and over again for weeks, unless you played it so ridiculously perfect.
I got a question for you. Would you say that that was the best balance state we've had so far, like in the years of Overwatch?
2017, 2018? Yeah. Minus Moth Mercy? Yeah. Moth Mercy in retrospect wasn't even that bad. It was bad, but like one character bad is, yeah.
I'm glad you're saying this, because when I'm arguing the other side of this, I would say stage 3 Overwatch League, after they've reined in Moth Mercy a bit, would be my one that I would say I would point to. And I agree with your points. I've made the same ones myself. That you could, like, you had some bunker with, but the problem is you had Mercy, right? Like, Mercy was ubiquitous all the time and people wanted that to change. But, you know, you had Widow, Tracer, a bit of dive and a bit of bunker, and you could rush as well if you had the full comp. So that's like the best case scenario, but I feel that that's like a 1 month period in a 4-year-old game. So I don't think
it lasted 1 month. Like, that entire era, sure. I mean, hit scans were strong, lots of things were coming strong. These days, I feel like with hero pools and stuff, you do see a wide variety of comps at the Overwatch League level. Although hero pools might just be the dictating factor for that. So I don't pay enough attention anymore. I would have to actually go back and like VOD review and watch.
Right, we actually do have a similar amount of diversity right now in the Overwatch League. It's not as much as that, but there's a mix.
The problem is that's with hero pools, is it not?
Right. Well, sometimes they have hero pools on some weeks, but teams develop those strats so that they have them practiced to be able to use them when they remove the hero pools as well. So we'll see, like, when this weekend's tournament comes up, if we do see the different comps that got developed during those hero pool weeks. But anyway,
the other thing
format argument insert here.
The other thing I want to add to that is actually just to build on your points is the regional the divisions that they've added now. I think that's one of the reasons why the diversity is increased as well, because the Asia regions are just love and dive, whereas obviously the Western regions are much more like double shield. So I actually think that's been really good for the meta, and that might actually help this same argument about like seeing more specific stuff, is that if you keep because OG Overwatch was all about like Rogue and Envious had one meta and Apex had its own meta, and then they would come and clash, and then you get to see them kind of play out. And I think that actually might be more healthy for Overwatch in overall, to have like less interaction between the regions, and then have them come, like, you know, fight each other once in every so often, just to see how it's kind of the power check on all of it. My 2 cents.
Yeah, I really like that. I agree. I love seeing just two different styles of play collide and which one comes out on top and where they're like strong, what maps are strong on, all that. I love all that stuff. I totally agree.
That's why I love traditional bunker, like on Anubis A against dive, like Overwatch League Season 1. Like that was always so fun to watch, where you have like Widow, Junkrat on the defense versus Genji, Sombra on the offense or something like that. Like that interaction was always like super enjoyable. I actually have to go, guys, because apparently I told somebody I'd have dinner with them at 7:30. 7:45. So I'm an idiot.
No worries.
Yeah, Overwatch more important. Sorry.
One word summary of Genji. Let's go. 1 sentence summary. Genji.
I think he never needed to be buffed. I was happy that he was, but bring the game down to his power level. Thank you guys so much for having me. Chat, you guys are awesome.
Thank you, Samito. Thank you.
Bye.
Hashtag she's overpowered, broken.
I will. We'll probably need to close up now as well, since it'll be awkward, just the three of us. But one last point. Just want to say, I agree with the points made about the Moth meta, but hardly anybody was saying that at the time. I tried to say it. I'm like, this meta is actually a lot better than people give it credit for, but you know, nobody wanted Moth to be a ubiquitous pick rate, 100%. So I think we're in agreement, actually, and I was really happy to hear that you said that, Seagull, because
she enabled a lot of things to be viable.
She broke that role. She broke that slot on the team, unfortunately, but you know, you could see a lot of different variation thanks to it. So I think maybe the goal should have one broken hero that sets up everything that we don't hate too much. It's just like, the problem is it was Moth back then, it's kind of Brig now. I don't know. It's rough.
Yeah, it is. No one will ever be happy. That's for sure.
This
Not
is all a
everyone. I
lot
mean,
easier when you have like a good hero pool system, I think, or some of the next step.
Or the
Whatever that would be in
bans, whatever
Overwatch
that might
2.
be.
Yeah, like you know,
Yeah.
Esports bans. I know Seagull's pro bans as well. I don't think we're
very
preaching to the
pro
choir here.
bans. Yes.
Right. That would make this way
Okay,
easier, right? Like then we wouldn't have to balance everything for it's like to compete against everything else at the same time, and we could actually have niche things.
I mean, I've always been adamant that one hero ban per team would be great, and people said no, that would break the game. And then they put in hero pools, which had 4 bans per game, and it didn't break
Yeah.
it. But yeah, okay, yeah, don't worry, I'm crazy though.
No, exactly. I have to get this off my chest. I feel like there was this collective amnesia where like there was this when the whole ban rumor started and Freedo was like, I think they're gonna bring bans in, guys. Everybody went wild, like, 1 ban? Are you crazy? It's gonna break Overwatch. And then suddenly 4 bans came in, and there was this collective amnesia where everyone was like, this is great. It's like the meme with that guy in the fire, and this is fine. And it's like, but 1 ban was crazy, and now 4 bans are okay? What?
It gets complicated because they were doing hero pools with a 2-week balance patch system, so it was actually a little bit too extreme. At the time, I was hoping that they would add hero bans and then stick to a monthly balance schedule, because hero bans with a monthly balance schedule would give it time to stabilize. Because usually, I think it's after like significant balance patches, it usually takes, in my opinion, 2 weeks on ladder before it starts stabilizing. Like it's usually pretty slow unless it's like unless not much is changing, or if like it's minor. But usually it is about 2 weeks. So
I agree. But I know we're running out of time, so let's quickly wrap up then. Genji, thoughts? I mean, Seagull, no one better to talk about Genji than you, so Genji.
So Genji, his recent buffs made him way over the top, in my opinion. I'm very happy they toned him down. I wish that so in total, his Genji buffs were deflect is longer, deflect is now cancelable, more shuriken damage.
Faster.
In the past year, they were faster. Not that this patch, but a previous one, they got faster. And then the effective range of his right click was further because they tightened the cone, which means essentially versus tanks at mid range, you can more commonly hit 3 shurikens. And then versus smaller targets like Ana or Zen, you can more commonly hit 2, which is a huge change. And so Genji got his assassination potential back, but he was way over the top. Like you could assassinate anyone. Like you could just solo dash in and like one shot somebody very consistently. And it was over the top. And I'm glad they nerfed it. But I feel that they toned it back a little bit too far back. And now he's in this strange position where like he is a little bit maybe more dangerous compared to where he was. But ultimately, I don't really see the Genji doing much unless he has Blade again. And I hate that style of Genji. I played Genji for so many years. And it was like the character I was most known for. I got like, that's why in my opinion, my Twitch stream became popular in the first place back in the day, was because I was like one of the few players who's like hardcore grinding Genji, who's really good at him. And it was, as I slowly realized he was becoming more and more of a Blade bot, I just did not want to play the character anymore. I hated it. I hated the fact that like the Genji play that I loved, which was like his not ultimate game of how do you get in, how do you assassinate people, get those cool combos off and get out, became, hey, Ana, do you have Q? Okay, cool. Do they have this cooldown? All right, cool. Let's go in. And that was like the character. And that's sort of where he is now. I do agree with Samito in his last comment where essentially if stuff was more toned back, Genji would probably be fine. I kind of agree with that. But even when stuff was being toned back, I'd like to remind people that Genji, even before Brig, was not meta. Like he was no longer meta by the time Brig was added. He was very niche because Widow was just better. Why bother playing off a Blade bot when you could just have a Widow and she's probably going to get more kills in that same time frame where you're waiting for the Blade to come up and all this stuff. But
This is another one.
overall, it's fun. He's fun. Sorry, I was always going to say, he's still
No,
fun.
no.
Yeah.
I was gonna say this is another one of the areas where actually it would be fun to have more individual or flavored variation, because I remember at that time the only person seeming to not be Blade bot Genji was Shadowburn, or so from I remember from Overwatch League, where he was like, I think there was like a stat at the time where he was like taking twice as long to pop Blade as any other Genji, even though he was building it, not at a dissimilar time, because he just had a completely different playstyle. But I'm not even sure you could get away with that kind of stuff anymore.
Well, his thing was just he would refuse to pop Blade unless it was perfect. Like unless he knew it would get a kills, he would not use it. That was like back in the day. So it wasn't like he wasn't playing like a blade bot. It was just he was making sure that like he would wait. He would even go like many team fights. He would just never use it. Like I still remember people would scrim against him. It'd be like, guys, if we never pop beat, he's never gonna blade. We're like, oh, okay, interesting. It's like, and then like imagine going an entire scrim where like if you pop beat once and he blades once and that's the map. And like this was like way back in the day. I'm trying to remember. But yeah, it was definitely unique. He's definitely had a unique playstyle, that's for sure.
I think the points you made about Genji are like a good cap to this podcast because they really wrap up your take on power creep and where you want the game to go, right? Where I have grown to not mind the flow chart Overwatch of like the cooldown checklist that you have to do in order to play any character now. Yeah, I suppose I just am more willing for this game to be more MOBA than shooter with how complex it is. And Genji, like, in order for him to be good now, he just has to be able to engage in those MOBA interactions, essentially, where but in some ways I kind of like it because canceling reflect feels good, and yeah, Genji's blade is a bit controversial, but I don't have too much of a take on that. I think it's really fun and people like it, so allow it to be good is probably a good call. But it also like it's one of those weird things where the breakpoints of everything in the ult fight is so specifically tuned to where like if you don't have the right thing, it's very modern Overwatch in that way, where if you don't have the right answer, like it just rolls you every time he's got blade, right? And you just get screwed. And like you almost need your teammate to swap in order to stop the bleeding of that being a definite guaranteed team fight. But at the same time, there's a lot of easy value in the game, so easier even still than that, in my opinion.
I just wish it'd be interesting to see what Genji would look like if you could not nano a blade. I'd be very curious.
Oh, terrible, probably.
No, I want him to get the Hanzo treatment. Hanzo
can't
like
the dragon.
damage during a dragon, right? That's how they had to balance him. They went to Hanzo. They went to literally his lore brother and was like, hey, looks like you're getting a lot of ult value. And we have to balance you around this? Like, nah, let's get rid of it. And then the Genji, they're like, nah, fuck you. You are ult only. Get in the corner right now. Pull out the blade. Like,
I feel like you're describing a nightmare you had
no,
at some point.
It's the reality.
You opened up a Pandora's box for me though, because if we were to legitimately depower creep the game, it would be the other way. Whereas I say, fine, every interaction in the game, just make it more complex so it's balanced. The other thing you could do is like depower creep the game in like you can't pick two shields or you can't nano boost. So like because the stacking of things together, right, is what makes it too broken.
Keep in mind what I'm describing is a rework essentially to Genji. I'm not describing like depower creep. Like when I say like, oh, we should just design Genji less around his ultimate, that is almost the level of a rework to like how much you're gonna have to rebalance him. I don't put that in the same realm as like, hey, let's tone down power creep in the game over the years, because to me, I personally define power creep as the levels of DPS buffs that have been in the game since Brigida's launch. Every single DPS has been buffed except Widowmaker and Doomfist and maybe Hanzo. That's it. Every other one has been buffed. And to me, that's what I call power creep. I have a very strict definition for it. And I also consider AoE healing to be power creep, power crept, I guess, in response to that as well, because as a lot of this gets added, it's like, well, BAP got added. Brig was added. A lot of this AoE sustain was added. Moira has always been a thing in the game, but
oh, we lost you.
You muted yourself again?
Happens every time.
Sure.
Anyway.
We just lost the end of that sentence. That's all right.
Yeah. Moira, you said Moira.
I was gonna bring up how Moira was balanced in my mind, but it's nothing really. Like Moira in my mind is okay because she has a clear weakness. She's good in Deathball, but she has almost no ranged heals. So she has like a very clear niche. And if she's OP, then make her a little riskier to play. Take off like 1 or 2 seconds off fade. Suddenly, like you can now dive a Moira if she messes up her shift. Like she doesn't have as much mobility because she can't shift to a teammate. That's like a really easy tweak. That all it is a number. Like, yeah. That's basically my thoughts on power creep.
Gotcha. The way I still include it is because he can reflect cancel with blade in his hand, right? Which is something that just it sounds insane if you put it in 2017 or something.
Oh,
right?
I felt that deflect cancel should not have been added. I felt that it took away the skill of Genji because deflect cancel used to be you just wall climb and it would cancel it. So you actually reduce the skill ceiling of the character because you tone that down from positioning and a clear indicator and all this other stuff to just push the button. So
I think this leads me well onto what I would ask for the concluding thoughts of, like, we've discussed a lot of the DPS, and the kind of theme that's emerged is take it all back, like take a lot of it back, strip it back. We're just going in the wrong direction, and Overwatch 2 is the chance to kind of right a lot of the wrongs that we've kind of sneakily added on top of one another. So I'll ask you first, Seagull, and then Freedo. Let's hypothesize that Overwatch 2 they're planning a lot of changes. We know obviously they've kind of indicated that their minds are quite open. We don't really know how far they're gonna go. What would you like to see? Just balance philosophy or specifically DPS changed in Overwatch 2, or hero styles, maybe format changes, anything. The floor is yours. What do you want to see done, particularly with regards to Overwatch 2?
I would like to see less reliance on cooldowns. Like it's such buzzwords to say. I hate it. It's just say like less reliance on cooldowns, less reliant on ultimates. Bring back more of the FPS style gameplay. It's been a repeating commentary in the community for like 2 to 3 years now, for a very good reason, and it's not going away. And if the developers will not comment on it when it comes to Overwatch 2, then usually that means either they just disagree or I don't know. And so, in my mind, the premise of the question that you were describing.
Oh, lost you.
Unmute.
Premise of the question. Muted? You said premise of the question, and then you got muted.
The premise of the question is kind of BS to me, because in my mind, it's about Overwatch 2 is being built as a PvE game right now. That's all we know is the PvE side of the game. Everything that has ever been talked about PvP is like very bits and pieces, like, oh yeah, we're rethinking this stuff. Yeah, we might rework characters. Yeah, yep. It's like it feels very, we don't know anything, and it's very disappointing. So I'm very pessimistic about it, because there needs to be more communication from the dev team on these issues to be like, yes, we're looking at fixing this part of the game at Overwatch 2. Here's how we look at it. And you don't even have to say exactly what you're doing. Just be like the principles of what you're trying to do, and just say that instead. And like, I don't know, just any communication would be so fantastic, but they're so stonewalled on it, right? They did an AMA on Reddit. They're like, yeah, no Overwatch 2. There's a streamer disclaimer.
Oh, muted again. Streamer disclaimer.
Yeah, there's just, I don't know why it keeps happening. I think my internet is dying. Anyway, they stonewall Overwatch 2 stuff is basically what I'm saying. So, and they're very focused on PvE, and I realize that, but they do have a very large PvP audience, and they should communicate with plans to Overwatch 2. That's my mind. They need to communicate. People have been talking about a lot of these issues for a long time, and if all they talk about over and over again is PvE, I mean, like, dude, I haven't even gotten into the PvE side of the game yet. We don't even know what that looks like. We don't, like, there's so many questions about Overwatch 2 I have so many on so many different aspects. We know almost nothing about the game, and that is mind-blowing to me. That we are, when was Overwatch 2 announced? Like last November.
Last BlizzCon.
And they weren't even willing to commit to 2020, and now we still don't know if it's coming out this year or next year. Probably won't come out this year, because they probably would be starting teasing or marketing by now. Like, we just don't know anything, and I find that to be so mind-blowing. It's insane to me.
It's unfortunate. I wonder if all the changes they have shelved for PvP, they just don't want to, like, they don't want to spoil it, basically. Like, they don't want to make it seem like the game you're playing now is lesser, because it's automatically going to look like that, right? So like they're going to take the wind out of their own sails in that department. I think your original question though is like, what do you want to see? Them to either complicate the game further was my power creep argument. Good power creep, ideally. Or what they can do is begin to like limit the game, and in order to anti it, so that you remove synergies that become oppressive. Because in truth, a lot of the most broken stuff is broken at the higher tiers, when they know how to, okay, we're all going to stand together around this Batiste, because Batiste is overpowered because he has AoE healing and goes here and has a lamp that we can play around. We can't die in this. So, okay. In ranked, like, if your teammate's out of position, Batiste sucks. Like, I try to tell people this, like, you can't you throw a lamp across the way in order to save him, when he's feeding. That doesn't work, right? The meta for average players is just totally different, and it gets broken by people who know how to play the game. So there just needs to be like restrictions so that they can have a good time. And I've felt this for a long time, but I feel the game, what's the right word, lets down the high level community the most out of anybody. Like they try to satisfy all people at the same time, but they do the biggest disservice to the high level community. Whereas like a game like Valorant, maybe it's a little bit the other way, where like they're willing to have the game be a little bit punishing maybe for the average player, but they're attacking just the high level player base. Blizzard kind of can't do that because they have a mainstream game. So I ultimately try to say, like, if you're going to go with this strategy, Blizzard, at least do it in the way that I think it can be done right, which is more akin to Dota, where it is very punishing. Everything's overpowered all the time, but you can still have a good time. Unfortunately, it like the FPS elements of that, I wouldn't even say they're hidden now, but they're just like they're overpoweredly broken to be equal to the overly powered broken cooldowns. So I do agree that the cooldowns are insane, but we still, if we can talk about Widow, Genji, and Ashe, and Batiste, even characters like this that do shoot, like I think Blizzard is achieving the game they want to design, and it looks like this. Like it might not be the esports game we would wish it would be, but I think this is what they actually want the game to play like, which sucks if you want a very good high level game. But anyway, that's my conclusion with that.
Everything we talk about though, it's so hard to talk about this because ultimately, like, there's so many issues that are just beyond gameplay with Overwatch as a franchise. Like, how is it acceptable for a live service game to be on our 5th summer of Lucio Ball in a row? How is that acceptable? How is it acceptable that we repeat the same seasonal events? How is it acceptable that our game has almost no content compared to any other game and any of its competitors? Ultimately, as a franchise, I'm not talking about just gameplay. Overwatch 2 better get their shit together, because it is a joke that other games can drop content on a seasonal basis or anything like this. And we're sitting here like, man, I really get 3 heroes this year. Valorant's like, yeah, we drop like a hero every 2 months. We have seasons, we have a battle pass, we got quests, we're gonna have lore, we're gonna drop all this shit. And it's like, oh, okay. Where are we? Overwatch 2 has to get that. Like, that is the industry now. Overwatch 2 has to get there. Like, that is the true what I want out of Overwatch 2 is content. And the hard part is, yeah, it's hard.
I think
we're gonna have more power creep if you keep adding content, Seagull.
Yeah, I know. That's the hard part, isn't it? Because all of the gameplay stuff we talk about is so difficult because Overwatch exists on this knife's edge that I was talking about earlier, right? The content that you add is so difficult to not, like, I don't know. I don't know how they fix this type of thing or how they do it, because there's so many things that, like, the players want to happen. Like myself, I'm like, I want more content like other games. Okay. You also need to stop power creep. It's like, wait, what? Like, you want the content, but you don't want to power creep the game. But like, if you add new heroes like every 2 or 3 months, you're gonna probably power creep the game. That's just how this shit works, right? So ultimately, you do conflict a little bit there.
Ban systems help. Discussing the format seriously helps.
We're on the same page here. I have been very adamant that a ban system needs to be added. Yeah, I've always been that way. I know I don't like hero pools. I like hero bans. I can go into that, but like, that's just who I am. Yeah.
I will say I like Seagull in 2020, who is so forthcoming about this stuff, because I've been a fan of you for a long time, as you know. I feel you've hardened and got angry about this as time has gone on, and I've lived through that with you, and I agree, and I share so many of the same concerns and have been saying it. I don't know why I'm like, my brain has flipped, so like I've just accepted the reality. So like I'm not as much of a maniac about it, like as we're all angry about it now. Kind of just accepting the fate. I don't know, but I appreciate where you're at and where you're coming from, and thank you for coming on the
reason
show
I get so angry about it is because I play this game for like 5 years. I put most of my life into this game. I love this game. I love this franchise. I wouldn't no life this game for like 10,000 hours if I didn't love it. The thing is, when you have someone like me who gets to the point where, like, if people like me get upset about the game, like, that's kind of normal. But I don't know. Like, it's not necessarily about being hardened. I think it's more about being almost a little bit bitter about how it's ended up over the years, where you see the lack of content and you see the amount of success other games are having, and you're like, that should be this game, because holy shit, this game is so fucking good. They just have to just get this shit together. And you're like, what? Like, come on. Like, we know it can be good. We know you can do it. You just have to put out some content. You have to stop being perfectionists. You have to go, like, either do a seasonal model or do a regular expansion model. At this point, full Call of Duty model to Overwatch would be better than what we have right now. You would get more content in a Call of Duty model, just a yearly release with nothing else. It's just, okay, let's nothing else, by the way, nothing else, like seasonal pass, whatever. You would get more content. Like, yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot I wish the game would have, but I know that there's so many conflicting issues at the same time. It's like, I have an issue of power creep, but I also want more content. Those two are at a little bit at heads with each other. They're making a PvE game right now. Do we even expect them to continue with seasonal content for Overwatch 2? Will there be any content? We don't know their content schedule plans. Will there be PvE raids? Will there be PvE loop progression? Will there be PvE anything? Where's there going to be hard content? Is there going to be easy content? Is this just going to be a campaign? We know literally nothing. And I find that to be so ridiculous for a franchise of this size that I currently have no idea if Overwatch 2 is closer to Destiny or Borderlands. Like, I don't know if it's that or I don't know anything. And I'm a guy who's played no life this game for like 5 years, and I don't know shit. That's insane. That, like, I can follow this community that close and still not know almost anything. I don't know. Yeah, it's nuts. Ultimately, everyone just wants the best for the game, and the only reason we sit here and we bitch about it all day is because we actually care. So I try not to do so in toxic ways. There's a lot of people out there who will, I'll call out Samito a little bit about this. They put too much pressure on a specific things. Like, Samito's like, I fucking hate Moira, I hate Brig, you know, things like this. But I'm trying to take the long-term approach to stuff like this.
Agreed. I'm a little more optimistic because in order to make the content we make, I have to force myself into a casual point of view a lot of times. So, you know, I just popped in the game on Switch the other day, and I'm like, this is pretty fun. You know what I mean? Like, the more you do that, and you realize the game isn't made for it isn't made for Overwatch League. It isn't made for the high level. They try to adjust it to make it make sense for that, but it's a Call of Duty game made for World of Warcraft players. Like, when you think of it that way, then I'm like, yeah, they're doing a pretty good job. If I think of it like the way you guys talk about it, I'm like, I agree completely. So,
but I think that's where a lot. Oh, go ahead, Seagull.
Oh no, you can go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think partly where the irksome comes from is the fact that that isn't clear, right? That's something we have to interpret from with the scraps of information that we get fed. Take, for example, Riot devs. They're very clear about this is what Valorant is, this is what it's for. Overwatch, as we always seem to come back to the same theme every time we do one of these podcasts. It always tries everything for everyone all the time. It wants all the cake and it wants to eat it too. It wants to be for the casual and also run an Overwatch League and never actually come out and say which one it's for. I think that's where this frustration that's in Seagull's voice is so clear, because he's like, just tell me what it is. Like, tell me what it's going to be. Is Overwatch 2 just for the casuals, in which case I don't have to bother and put so much time in? Or is it going to be is it going to be a PvP rehaul? Because then I want to know that's coming. And if it is, what is it? And I think as much as when we have discussions on this and when we're critical of Blizzard, it may seem from the outside in that we're just being toxic shitheads because it gives us content, or we don't, we just like bashing on the devs. No, I mean, the devs do an amazing job, and the reason we keep doing this is because we care about the game, because we all love the game passionately. Arguably, it's the game of all of our lives. And when we say this, we don't say this as a, like, outsider looking in and being like, I hate this game. We say this as, like, the partner who's been mistreated and just hoping that their significant other finds the right path.
I think I'm not too worried about, like, who's the audience for type of thing. To me, it's more of, it seems, it's just the fact that they are, like, Freedo, what you just said earlier, about like, oh yeah, they just started making the game for esports. Like, let's give it from that POV. Blah 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 blah. Like, in my head, I'm like, yeah, no shit. So many content creators have quit this game. Like, you're practically given up by that point. You're just like, yeah, I guess it's like that. Yeah, I guess I'll go pump out another YouTube video. Yep, guess I'll try this game real quick on Switch. You know, it's like, oh man, that's what it kind of felt like just listening to that just now.
Yeah, it is depressing. I mean, there used to be 3 people working on the channel, Seagull. Like,
I know, isn't it just, you know?
Yeah, and you know, we do a Valorant channel as well. I guess also it is easier when, you know, I spend time making Valorant content, so it helps the perspective. But you're totally right. I'm not arguing at all. It is this massive like coming to terms with it and accepting that it's let you down in order to get over it, I guess.
I am just very curious personally where the future of the game goes, where the dev team has already demonstrated that we are going to sacrifice content to build up Overwatch 2. We go, okay, Overwatch 2 and most of that development time, apparently, more than likely, I'd imagine, is probably going towards the PvE side of the game. Why would that not continue in the future? Because now you're splitting the dev team, you're splitting your focus, you're splitting everything. If it was already rough in Overwatch 1 when PvP was the only focus, why should I expect it to improve in any meaningful capacity for Overwatch 2 now that you're implementing and adding an entire PvE mode that you have said on record you want to be a lifestyle game, to have end game that people can make their own, their primary game that will appeal to players that never really like the PvP side of the game, etc., etc. That's all cool. I'm probably going to love Overwatch 2 because, no offense, I love almost any looting game that I can grind in. I will fucking love it. I will play the shit out of that. That's cool. I have full faith in Blizzard to make a PvE product in that regard. You have MMO devs like Jeff Kaplan who know everything. Like, dude, they are so fucking smart when it comes to that shit. It is unbelievable. I have full faith. The thing I'm curious about is the future of the PvP side of the game in the future. Will that continue to be a priority in any fashion? Because I doubt it. I very much doubt it.
I guess none of us really know either. That's the thing. I mean, even the people so close to the game, the fact that that's what's really damning. I think the people so close. We have on to the left of me the guy who's like literally the YouTube channel for Overwatch and like the most reads every source of anything. And then we have one of the most iconic names in Overwatch history who has been there from the start. And now the fact that neither of these people know what's coming is I think quite damning. I think that's quite damning in itself.
Yeah, we'll hopefully see. No more stuff soon. Yeah. I hate to end on such a bad note.
Yeah.
But I still find the game fun enough to not be too bitter about it. I think it's a crazy good time, and I think a lot of casual players agree. Unfortunately, it's not a reasonable or balanced or high level game to be taken seriously. So with the right format, it could be both. So get your act together, Blizzard. That's what I say for Overwatch 2. There's so much opportunity.
That is way more pessimistic. I think it's a great competitive game, just a little bit crazy balance, power creep. That's a little bit too intense for me. But I am worried about the future and the lack of content and managing issues like power creep in the future without systems to try and mitigate the insane razor's edge they live on, like hero bans. Yeah, I know. We're generally on the same page.
Yeah. And I don't want to end on a super depressing note, so yeah, let's have an optimistic note for the future, and hope that I mean they do listen, they do care, so I don't think it's that. So let's just hope they decide, and the end product.
An example, I think they're gonna have like tournaments for Overwatch 2. They said that in the AMA. So like if we take that as an example, right? Like hopefully that's like 1 out of 100 or whatever changes that kind of deal with some of these problems. They got to be aware of these things, right? So. You'd hope it's a big step up with the sequel.
I'm not worried because no matter what, I'm gonna enjoy the PvE side of the game. Like I know I'm gonna love it. So like even if PvP and Overwatch 2 sucks, I will loot goblin the shit out of Overwatch PvE. I will love it. Like I don't know. I love the franchise, I love the universe, and I'm very confident they will make a good PvE game no matter what. I'm just worried about PvP in the long term. That's it.
And yeah. On that optimistic note, Seagull, are you still streaming, by the way? Because then we can just send everyone here to your stream. Are you still gonna stream?
I'm probably I'll stream for a little bit, but I'll probably end it pretty soon as well. But yeah.
Well, in that case, I'm just gonna raid Seagull. Everybody go watch whatever Seagull's doing right now, and just want to thank you so much for your time, Seagull. Like we've gone on, we end up going deep with these ones, Freedo, but yeah, we've gone on for a long time. We've discussed pretty much everything under the sun, even DPS excluded. And again, thank you very much Samito as well for his time here. I hope he's having a good dinner right now. Thank you very much Freedo as well, always is be here with me. But guys, it's been amazing. We've been on an emotional journey together, and let's see where it takes us when Overwatch 2 comes out. But yeah, again, just thanks so much. It's been awesome. Any concluding thoughts? Sign offs.
Shout out to the community for watching us rage and vent about weird shit. You guys are cool.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you guys for putting up with us in our old jaded ways. But yeah, thank you so much. Go check out Seagull. Thank you guys.